Recording in progress.
Hello and welcome. My name is Renee. This is a special episode of Embodied Astrology that I am offering both as video and audio. So welcome to folks who are tuning in from either space, listening, visual. You can also find a written transcript in the Embodied Astrology member space if you would prefer to read rather than listen or watch. So my name is Renee. As I mentioned, I am a second generation astrologer and somatic educator. I'm an artist. I'm a queer person. I am a multidimensional human who's interested in a lot of things. And astrology is one of my passions. I think about astrology through the language of the body, through somatics, through sensation, and energetics. And I'll do my best to speak about what I'm sensing in this reading in ways that are an offering for the collective. I generally offer every month or at the beginning of each new zodiac season, I offer season ahead readings for all 12 signs. And those are coming for Capricorn season. They will be coming out a little bit later than usual in early January because I'm including those readings for Capricorn season in my year ahead. And so if you're interested in hearing about how 2024 astrology is resonating with your sign, with your rising, sun, or moon signs, or if you're a person who really likes to nerd on Astro and you know where all your house placements are, or you think about different planetary energies, you can certainly tune in with any sign and glean guidance from astrology in the 12 sign interpretations of sun sign work. And so now in this reading, I'm going to be sharing a little bit of what has been coming up for me as I've been tuning in with 2024 as a year. And over the last couple of weeks, as I've been preparing and then starting to record the 2024 readings for each sign, I've definitely been meditating and sitting with the collective astrology. So this will be my offering for the year ahead to anybody who is interested, who resonates. I've told you a little bit about where I'm coming from and want to reiterate that every astrologer has their own perspective. This is a very ancient practice. Astrology has accompanied human beings since the dawn of civilization. It has manifested in so many different iterations. Every astrologer is going to have their own take on how to read the symbols. It is a creative act to interpret astrology, and astrology is a symbolic language. So take what works and leave the rest. Make the meaning that's meaningful for you. If anything that I offer resonates for you, I hope that it does so in ways that serve and support your greatest well-being and the health, happiness, and success of you and your relations. What else do I want to tell you before I get into it? I will say that if you do resonate with me and with my style, I hope to see you in Somatic Space, which is a weekly class that I offer, typically on Mondays, although sometimes the day does change. We'll be rescheduling the classes that are currently scheduled for the Mondays of Christmas and January 1st. But typically on Mondays or the Moon's Day, we meet on Zoom and you're welcome to drop in. You can also get a membership to Somatic Space, and every week we work with astrology as a somatic score. So we consider the influences of astrology and how they might feel to experience them, what they might bring up in our consciousness, relationships, and day-to-day interactions and work. And through movement, through meditation, guided visualization, and internal experiencing, we prepare ourselves to work skillfully with the astrology of the week ahead. You might also be interested in some other things that are going on at Embodied Astrology in 2024. It's a very exciting year for Embodied Astrology. This is a 10-year-old project now. I began this podcast in 2014. I started reading charts 2 years before that, working as a consulting astrologer. And the project of Embodied Astrology has taken many shapes over the last decade. And the current shape that it's morphing into is a collective shape. This is very much aligned with the astrology of 2024. As an astrologer, I really try and time my life with Astro and also prepare for what astrological symbolism is inviting in terms of my opinion or read on it. And 2024 is a huge invitation to become more collaborative, to co-work and connect across our various intersections and explore the spaces where our differences and similarities can produce new ideas, new approaches, and different ways of accessing old and new information. And so in this coming year, I'll be co-facilitating and co-creating with a group of 4 other astrologers and people who are applying astrology in various ways, creatively, artistically, towards activism, towards healing practices and self-work, as well as conflict mediation and conflict mapping. We are working to explore astrology as an experiential and embodied language and cultivate new practices for group work with astrology. There are a lot of ideas that we have, and the program is emerging as I speak. We will begin the new program with the astrological new year in Aries season of 2024, so around March and April. And if you're interested, check out our offerings at embodiedastrology.com. Okay, I think that's it for announcements and housekeeping. So I'm going to give a read into Capricorn season and then feel forwards into 2024. Anything that I offer is a glimpse, it's a slice. There are so many symbols here and so many ways to read them. And part of the struggle that I always feel when I come to communicate astrology is how to get it all out, because it's never possible. So again, take what works, leave the rest. If things resonate for you, let them expand inside of your awareness and intuition. See where you go with them. If they don't resonate for you, maybe they're not for you. Right? Okay, let's get into it. December 21st, we reach the solstice and the beginning of Capricorn season. And I am going to share a chart with you. So let me pull that up. And as I share this chart, also for those of you who are astrologers and practicing astrology, I'm so curious what you see. Maybe you will leave me some comments on the podcast or the video or on our member space on Circle. All right, here we go. Except this is the wrong year. Here we go. December 21st, 2023. I'm recording for you, by the way, on December 19th, 2023. The moon has just gone into Aries today, and the light of Gemini is rising here in the Pacific time zone. So I hope that those are supportive influences for me to do this work of translating. So the solstice arrives and Capricorn season commences. Now, Capricorn season in the Northern Hemisphere is the longest night of the year. In the Southern Hemisphere, it is the longest day. This is a time of increasing polarity. In the times of the solstice, definitely depending on what hemisphere you're in, but I think either hemisphere can resonate with this. In the times of solstice, we are really called to feel the balance of inner and outer. This is reflected in the turning of the calendar year. And so as we transition from 2023 into 2024, a lot of us will naturally be sensing inwardly and internally, thinking about what has transpired over the last 12 months, where we are in terms of our own growth and goals and desires, and how that meets up with what's happening in the world. And that balance of inner and outer, internal, external awareness is heightened when we work with the cardinal influences. Capricorn is a cardinal sign. The cardinal cross is also occupied by the signs Cancer, Aries, and Libra. And the cardinal cross is definitely going to be quite stimulated in 2024, especially in Aries season and with eclipses. And so I'll be talking about that in a little while. But first, Capricorn season. So we enter into Capricorn season while Mercury is retrograde, and you can see that the Sun and Mercury are very close to one another in the beginning of Capricorn season. And actually the next day on the 22nd, Mercury forms its inferior conjunction, or Cazimi, which is a wonderful word, with the Sun. That word means to enter into the heart of the Sun. Traditional astrologers view this as a time that the planetary body is infused with solar influence and solar light. Solar energy pertains to life force, vitality, and consciousness. And Mercury is symbolically associated with thoughts and cognition and perception. It is sometimes called the communicator or the microphone of the planetary pantheon. It delivers messages. Mercury is the closest planet to the Sun. In its planetary composition, it is almost all metal. Its proximity to the Sun and its makeup definitely also increases the symbolic association of kind of microphone or transmitter of energy. And one of my favorite ways to think about Mercury is through the lens of Buddhism, actually. Some of you may be familiar with the concept of the buddhi, or the part of our minds that translates between pure consciousness and subjective experience. And so in this translation, there are all kinds of things happening. And a very important thing that's happening is the collection of information, what data is coming in at any given moment in our lives. There's a huge amount, an infinitesimal amount of information that we could absorb, but we're only going to absorb so much of it, and it's going to be a limited amount. And then out of all the information that we absorb, what comes into our consciousness? What do we really perceive? And then what meaning do we make out of it? What are the stories that we're telling? Where and how does our attention travel? And so when Mercury is in the heart of the Sun, the idea is that our perceptive, cognitive coherence is being infused and revitalized by solar force. Now, the inferior conjunction happens when Mercury is retrograde and closest to the Earth, or passing between the Earth and the Sun. And so this also increases the symbol of it being quite a subjective period of time, and that our cognition and coherence and perception are quite internal. And in this internal awareness, new light is being called forth inside of our perceptive capacity. So Mercury and the Sun will form their inferior conjunction at 0 degrees of Capricorn, right at the beginning of the sign. And this is also a degree point that stimulates the first degrees of all the cardinal signs, including the first degree of Aries, which is considered to be a very powerful initiatory degree point in the zodiac. And this symbol points us towards new experiences, new initiations, and catalysts for new capacities in our perception. Now, the first degree of Capricorn is coming from the landscape of Sagittarius. I'm recording for you in Sagittarius season, and right after Mercury forms its inferior conjunction to the sun, it will actually retrograde back into Sagittarius, where it will station direct on the first day of 2024. But before we get there, let's stay with the inferior conjunction and think about this place in the zodiac. The transition between Sagittarius and Capricorn is the transition between the fire element and the earth element. Sagittarius is often associated with beliefs, philosophies, worldviews, and religions. It is a sign that is emblematic of the seekers and those who quest for knowledge and truth. It is a sign that describes a desire for big picture analysis and understanding. Keywords like wisdom and truth are very important for Sagittarius, but Sagittarius is a fire sign, and the fire triplicity, Aries and Leo being the other fire signs, the fire triplicity as a whole brings us into personhood, into selfhood. And so wisdom and truth, we really need to understand in many ways as subjective and not ubiquitous. And where wisdom and truth are cultivated is in the space, again, between the internal and the external. And so as we navigate our lives, as we come into contact with the cultural values of our particular locations and the era and the time that we're in, we are influenced in ways that sometimes challenge, sometimes support our intrinsic and innate values. How we seek to understand the world around us is a constant blossoming and unfolding. Ideally, we are never satisfied. Ideally, there's always a questing for deeper meaning and truth. And the journey goes on because mystery is infinite. And there's some really deep reminders in the symbolism of Sagittarius that point us back to the earth when we're considering the truth of everything that could be or what's out there. The axiom, as above, so below, is definitely something that we want to consider when we're working with Sagittarius. For all the questing that we might do, for all that we seek to understand, we can also find so much expansion and the keys to many of life's mysteries inside of our own bodies, in the soil that is directly below us, and in the living systems that we are part of here on planet Earth. Now, Capricorn is an earth sign. The earth element definitely relates with earthly things, and earth in its own life force and vitality and creative brilliance and the biodiversity that it comprises and holds is an earth thing that the earth signs relate with for sure. But within the human realm, we also have earthly concerns. And with Capricorn, we have concerns about what lasts and what can be built, and concerns that have to do with our own identification of ambitions and goals and how we might define success. Capricorn is associated with authority structures and figures, and therefore is also associated with models of governance. When it comes to authority structures and figures, first and foremost, in any of our lives, we're going to have the authority of time itself and embodied creation. So the only thing any of us can be certain of in our lives is that they're going to end. And until they end, we can also be certain that we will be subject to the laws of aging and gravity. We can also be quite certain that we will experience hardship, challenge, and suffering. And beyond that, anybody's guess is as good as mine, right? Lives are incredibly varied. People are wildly different in terms of our experiences and the conditions that we are emerging in. So when we're considering Capricorn, we definitely need to consider the limitations of the Earth realm and the specific conditions that we're dealing with in any given moment. And that could be personally or collectively. For example, in 2023, as we move into 2024, as a collective, any of us who identify as human beings, life forms here on planet Earth, there is a real concern, I would say, about climate. We're living in what some people will call the Anthropocene. This is a period of time or an epoch of earthly existence that has been more greatly shaped by human influence and interference than any other era has been. And our influence here, or I should say cumulative influence, or maybe dominant influence at this particular time, has led to environmental destruction and breakdown. There will be increasing climate disasters, and climate chaos is a reality that we really need to contend with. And so we might consider that as an issue to be faced in the realms of Capricorn, if we're thinking about conditions and the challenges that they bring. Now, what this means for you in your personal life will have a lot to do with the conditions that you face. The negative effects of climate chaos will touch everybody's lives. It doesn't matter where on the globe you are. But as with many challenging conditions, those most adversely affected will overwhelmingly be folks who have less financial resource or access to geographic mobility. They will be folks who overwhelmingly are also situated in parts of the Earth that have really had the least to do with creating the causes of climate chaos, but are bearing the worst brunt. And so these are this includes the global South really as a whole, but also includes communities that have already historically been negatively impacted by lack of foresight, poor planning, and extractive mindsets. Communities where poorer people live, often communities where we have larger percentages of Black and Brown folks, Indigenous communities, etc. So then we have some themes of Capricorn coming in that have to do with other kinds of authority or control or dominance. I'm going to be a little bit tangential here. I might deviate around a bit, but in terms of our lives, we come in immediately. We are subject to the authority of time and gravity, the conditions on Earth. Then we are subject to the conditions of our lives. And as I just mentioned, those are various and really depend so much on lineage. And lineage is a big theme for Capricorn. Who are your ancestors? What did they have or not have access to? What were they part of in terms of co-creating evolution? Did they participate in certain ways that have allowed you to benefit, or that have put, or I should say, that have put you in a position where you might even carry responsibility towards repair or accountability to what happened? Did your ancestors engage with resistance with those movements? where are you coming from, right? In terms of your responsibility, your lineage, your worldview, your inheritances, etc. Capricorn then can also describe authority figures in our lives. First, there are our parents, and Capricorn is a symbol that is often connected with parental archetypes. Some people will say specifically paternal archetypes, and there is a reason to go down that route. I tend to be less gender specific. I think that Capricorn and its opposite sign Cancer both deeply connect with parental archetypes, including mother and father archetypes, as well as the expansive gender categories of parental archetypes. And some of us didn't grow up with biological parents. We might have had caregivers or foster parents or other people who were taller than us, making decisions that really affected our lives. We can certainly include teachers in the pantheon of authority figures. We can also include police or parole officers or people who are enforcing cultural rules, people who are in positions to punish as well as reward, and therefore people who entrain in us the values of the society or the family or the culture. Whether or not we agree is not really the question right now. It has more to do with the conditions and what is being imposed upon us, whether that imposition is a force that we certainly can't argue with, like aging, although there's plenty of people out there trying to find a way out of that. But aging, time, right? Maturation, these are themes in Capricorn, but also rules and the status quo and the dominant ideologies of the time or the governing principles of whatever society or culture that we might find ourselves inside of. Sagittarius, as it transitions into Capricorn, describes the codification and formalization of beliefs into structure. So the philosophies that form governance, for example, or the religions that form the rules and the expectations of how somebody might act. So the inferior conjunction, Mercury's Cazimi with the Sun at the very first degree of Capricorn, describes a moment of the consciousness and perceptual functions being infused by new ideas of authority and governance and leadership. Because Mercury is retrograde and moving back into Sagittarius, I'm going to say that these new ideas are questions and critiques more than they are definitive answers or ideas about what we will do. There is something that is breaking down as we move into Capricorn season. And what is breaking down needs to be reworked and reimagined. The RE prefix is an astrologer's favorite tool for all retrogrades, and Mercury retrogrades definitely want to invite us to rethink, to revise, to reword, to reclaim, to remember. There are often necessary returns that happen during Mercury retrogrades. We can't move forward with business as usual. We need to go back and revisit something that may have been obscured, to review, etc. The last week and a half or so of 2023, basically from the solstice until the end of the year, is infused with the feeling of forms falling apart. And I think for a lot of folks, this is maybe joyful or exciting to some extent, because the forms that have been holding them in some kind of shape haven't been functioning so well. I'm going to come back to that in a second. There may be really significant problems or limitations that we're experiencing, especially in the forms of governance and authority and leadership. There may be forms that we have internalized from the dominant culture or from our familial or societal influences around what our ambitions or goals or success should look like, that just don't really hold up anymore. And we want to crack them open. There's a kind of itchiness or agitation that I'm feeling in the collective right now that wants to push back against limitations, against rules, against governing principles, and find the new idea. And so Mercury heading back into Sagittarius, and then over the course of the next several days, making some important aspects. Mercury will form a conjunction with Mars, for example, on December 27th. Venus will also enter Sagittarius on the 29th. So we have a lot of motivation, a lot of energy, impetus, and reason to be asking big questions, to be pushing back against authority, to be seeking freedom and liberation, to be feeling dissatisfied with what has been given to us as truth or wisdom, and needing to reclaim maybe some of our deeper knowings that are in conflict or contradiction to societal prescription. Now, I mentioned that a lot of the structures in our lives are not working. And this could include governmental structures. So many governmental structures are not working. People are struggling right now. People are struggling worldwide. There is a housing crisis. There are food shortages. There's a lot of economic instability. The whole system of global economics is really problematic. There's very few people who have way more than they need, and most people on Earth don't have enough of what they need. And an enormous percentage of life on Earth is really significantly struggling, and there's a lot of scarcity. And so when it comes to governance and world leadership, and certainly leadership on national levels, there is a lot to criticize right now and feel dissatisfied with. And I imagine that you, like me, might be feeling those kinds of ways. On a more micro level and personal level, there are many aspects of our lives that directly interface with these larger global systems. A lot of people are feeling really fed up with systems of labor and expectations around productivity. There's a huge movement right now to reclaim our time and energy from the corporate machine. I think a lot of people are looking for different ways to give their gifts and use their strengths and provide for their necessities and basic needs and their families that aren't requiring them to only go to work, right? The idea that like a 60-hour work week is normal is pretty messed up when you think about what our biological systems thrive with, and the kind of integration that is only able to be accessed through rest and sleep and relationship or communion, the necessity for a balanced parasympathetic system in order to maintain our immunity, for example, People need downtime, and they also need pleasure. They need connection and relationship. They need to experience beauty if life is going to be meaningful at all. And so many people, for many reasons, but all of those reasons really relating to wealth inequities, so many people don't have access to that. There also might be other structures that aren't working in your life that may have more to do with internalized ideas of authority and the status quo. And so relationships could be breaking down. Your own ideas about what your personal values are and where you're headed and what you're trying to do with your life might feel, you might feel a little claustrophobic inside of them, or like they don't really resonate anymore. And when we consider what else is happening in Capricorn, and so here I'm going to point to Pluto. Pluto is currently at the very last degree of Capricorn. This is a really important symbol. So Pluto entered Capricorn in 2008. Pluto has a very long orbit around the sun, longer than any of our lifespans will be. It takes over 200 years to make one full orbit. And therefore, it spends about 14 to 20 years in any given sign. Pluto will be leaving Capricorn in 2024, and I'm going to talk more about its movement in a little bit. But as we enter into Capricorn season and as we move into the new year, Pluto is at the very last degree of Capricorn. It will revisit this degree this year. It's going to hang out here a lot. We're also going to have some other aspects and stimulation at this degree. So it's definitely a point to be paying attention to. This degree in Capricorn is symbolic of the formalized governance and leadership structures and how decisions are being made that affect the welfare of the large group or the whole. So we might think about secret societies, you know, the stonemasons or something like that. Or in this current era, we might just think about global leaders. And particularly, we might think about the power behind governmental leadership. The power behind leadership are often corporate powers, lobbying powers. In our current era, we definitely have fossil fuels and military power pushing for a lot of what governments will do, right? And legislation that gets passed. Some people believe that there are also orders of light workers here on the earth and individuals who coordinate more energetically to help humanity evolve. So we can certainly call in that symbolism as well. Pluto's journey through Capricorn since 2008 has been a deeply transformative one. And Pluto in its symbolism connects us to Hades, to the mythic underworld. And Pluto is described as the lord of the underworld or the supreme being of the underworld. And in that association, Pluto's archetype and symbolism points to death and dying as a process, but also death forces as they move through our lives. And death forces might be the ways that we make decisions in our lives that contribute more towards suffering than pleasure, for example. Pain, manipulation, suffering, terror. These are Pluto states. I'll also say that every astrological symbol describes such a vast potentiality, and that Pluto as an archetype might bring us into these places of fear and pain and suffering and manipulation or misuse and abuse of power. But when our consciousnesses encounter those kinds of experiences, frequently what happens is transformation. And so as people encounter experiences that require them to move through fear. For example, they might find that at the other side of that kind of experience, they have transformed and they are significantly less afraid and therefore more liberated. They feel more empowered in their own life and in their own body. Collectively, as we experience Pluto processes, there are also processes of transformation taking place. And so Pluto is associated too with the transformative and regenerative potentials of the underworld as an idea. And the underworld as an idea is the compost bin. It is the place where things are breaking down. They're really stinky. They might be disgusting, but they're also going to create fertility and nourishment and growth for new life forms. Because of Pluto's outer planet status and how long it takes to orbit the sun and stay in each sign, it is considered to be a transpersonal planet. And that means that when we read its transits, we want to think about what's happening in the collective and here on Earth in an era, and then how we as individuals are being shaped by the era and how we are responding to what's happening in the collective, and how we can also participate in the collective transformation and evolution. Capricorn is a sign that is associated with governance, authority, the powers of domination and history. In 2008, Pluto entered Capricorn. There was an economic recession. There was, in many ways, kind of the intensification and movement after however many decades it had been of climate scientists telling us what to expect. Over the last 14 years, there's finally been a little bit more mobilization on governmental levels, in many ways due to the increasing pain and suffering and awareness that we have on collective levels of misuse of power or mismanagement of funds. This has also been a time on Earth when there has been a lot of uprising and protest and resistance towards the brutal and violent forces of dominant power. So if we go back in history, the last time Pluto was in Capricorn, the Declaration of Independence was drafted and signed, codifying the United States of America, or incorporating the United States of America, of course, on stolen land with appropriated philosophy. The founders took a lot of language and ideas from the Haudenosaunee Confederacy to create the Declaration of Independence. The United States as an idea is incorporated and founded fundamentally on inequality. The right to, freedom and determination of happiness is really only for a limited group of people who fit the status of dominant power in the US, and that group of people, primarily cisgender, straight, white men who are overwhelmingly Christian and who are overwhelmingly also at least middle class, if not upper class, quite wealthy folks. Those are the people who have really been able to shape governance inside of this iteration of a democratic experiment. But here we are, and it has been the Pluto return of the United States over the last couple of years. And so these systemic issues of inequality and domination and land theft and indigenous erasure and genocide, and the fact that so much of the wealth of the United States, and particularly the ultra wealthy beneficiaries of like settler colonial expansion, have built their wealth through slavery, through stolen labor, through stolen land, and that this has actually created the conditions of greater economic disenfranchisement and a societal structure where we don't have democracy. Actually, this is not a functional democracy. So many people don't have the right to vote. So many people can't, really use their voice or their power and are barred from accessing economic power, legislative power, etc. And over the course of Pluto's tenure in Capricorn since 2008, a lot of these issues have been brought to light because of more awareness of brutality. And so whether we're thinking about economic recession and the bailout of big banks by the government and continued protections for wealthy shareholders, or if we are thinking about ongoing police violence and indiscriminate murder of Black people in America, or if we are thinking about devastation of Indigenous communities and Indigenous land. These have all been hot topics since Pluto has been in Capricorn in a larger collective sense. Not to say folks weren't talking about this for the last centuries. They were. They've been, asking for recognition and awareness for a long time. But since Pluto has come into Capricorn, there has been an increase of public awareness. And in that increase of public awareness, there has been an increase of struggle, of pain and suffering in many ways. The brutality of the state has not been reduced, but the awareness has risen, and transformative measures have been and are being attempted. And so as Pluto moves into Aquarius this year, we're going to be seeing the results of that and moving forward with that. But to stay in Capricorn season for the moment, I'm going to say that as we enter into Capricorn season, Pluto has not yet moved into Aquarius. We are resting at the last degree of Capricorn, and the last degree of any sign is considered to be a afflicted place, in a problematic or challenging place. And so if you think about, your last day somewhere before you move, maybe you're the type of person that you're really prepared, and you get to your last day and you're just gonna have a party and you're so chill and you're really ready for a transition. But I know for me, if I was about to make a really big move or a big transition, there would be a lot of anxiety. And in the space before a big transition, there's often a grasping or gripping to the past. There can be a lot of nostalgia. There can be doubt and second guessing of new directions. There can be resistance to the new thing for all kinds of reasons. There can be anxiety and fear and trepidation about what we do not yet know. If you're trying to move across the country and you've been somewhere for a minute, you might also have all kinds of people being like, no, don't go. Why are you doing it? It's a terrible mistake. You should just stay here. So Pluto will spend a good amount of time at the anaretic degree in 2024, and it is here as we come into Capricorn season. And so this is one of the influences that I'm reading this year as a sensation of one foot in the past, 1 foot in the future. There's a real strong pull by historic gravity right now, by people and mindsets that have benefited from these historic conditions, that are terrified of what happens next, that cannot even imagine it, can't imagine how it would be good for them. And they will resist. And inside of our own lives, even if we're people that are like, viva la revolucion, let's go, there may be an unknown about how to do that in our own lives. I'm feeling this all the time. I'm constantly thinking it's about communal resource sharing and support. And, I want to be someone who doesn't have to live so isolated and can live in more, community space. And in my own life, I don't always really know how to do that. I'm someone, as you know, many people are right now, that is really struggling to continue upholding the expectations of capitalist productivity. I don't want to base my entire life on making money to survive. I have other things that I want to do. I feel like there's much better use for my skill and energy and the gifts that I have to give than working all the time. But prices are going up, the cost of living is going up, and I'm not independently wealthy. And so I'm still here coming to work every day, and I don't really know how to change that for myself. And I think that a lot of folks are in these kinds of predicaments, and your predicament might be similar, the same as mine. You might have your own variations of it. But there are ways that we are struggling to let go of what we know. That could be inside of our relationship or family models. It could be in our work lives. It could be the ways that we consume resources and engage with economies. It could be the ways that we organize around governance and leadership. There are many, many ways that folks are really in a bind right now. A lot of people recognize that certain things are not working, that a lot of things are not working, that they are not sustainable, that they will not lead to the future, but the new alternatives are not yet here, or they're not reliable, they haven't been tested, and it might be a big risk to change. And so there is a considerable amount of tension as we finish up 2023 and move into 2024. However, Jupiter, also in the Earth element, is stationing direct at the end of the year. So we have Jupiter turning direct on December 30th in the sign of Taurus. And Taurus, like Capricorn, is an Earth sign. Unlike Capricorn, I'm going to say that Taurus doesn't necessarily rely on dominance, right? It's not about whose leadership or authority is going to create this. But the pure potentiality and the fecund, fertile nature of Earth and the material realm. And the authority here in the realms of Taurus is the Earth itself. And the rule, the rule of this authority is change. Death is part of that, right? This is part of the conditions, the Capricorn conditions or limitations that we face in our human lives. But here on Earth, the rule is change. And nothing is permanent. Everything changes. This age that we are in currently is an age. And there have been other ages on Earth. When you learn about Earth's history, you'll learn that there have been multiple circumstances where most life on Earth actually perished. So great ages of apocalypse and world regeneration have already happened multiple times. I think like 97% or something of all life on Earth has been wiped out at least 4 or 5 times already. Earth is 4.5 billion years old. Humans have been here for around 250 million years. That's enormously different in terms of time scale. In the time that humans have been here, there have been all different kinds of civilizations and societies. There have been all different kinds of iterations around wealth and power and cosmology and religion and philosophy and values. It is really easy to imagine and fantasize that what we are experiencing in any given moment is going to stay the same forever. But that is not accurate. That is a fantasy. And the nature of Earth is change. Now, Taurus, in its fertile nature, does describe processes of change, but it also resonates with the nature of the body. And the nature of the body, even though it is implicitly, intrinsically changing, in our earthly day-to-day experiences, we feel some amount of attachment to permanence. And the idea of attachment is really important with Taurus. Attachment to stability, attachment to security, attachment to comfort. And when we get attached to whatever it is, we might be attached to our ideas about who we are, our ideas about what we need. There might be basic needs that are being fulfilled, and we are attached to those needs being met. Like, I'm a person who is very rhythmic. I really like this one kind of toast. I've been eating the same kind of toast for breakfast for like 5 years. I'm really attached to it. When that is threatened, I feel cranky and I don't know what to do. So when we're working with Taurus, we are working with the nature of attachment and possession. We are working with desires for comfort, stability, and security. We're working with the needs of life forms on Earth to experience some kind of stability. And so without stability, we can't survive very long. We need stability in our climates to grow our food. We need stability in our relationships to have any kind of psychological ground. We need stability and consistency in order to do the things that we want to do here on Earth, and to utilize our power. Power is a big word for the Earth element, especially with Taurus and Capricorn. And this is material power. This is manifesting power. This is creative power. Since 2017, the outer planet Uranus has been in Taurus. Now, Uranus in many ways relates to this kind of core force of life that I was speaking to a moment ago, which is change. Uranian philosophy or cosmology brings us back to kind of an initial formation story of life on Earth. The sky god Uranus is one archetype that we might connect to. I think about that cosmology as pointing us to the building blocks of life on Earth coming from the stars, and the Earth being seeded with potentiality. And potentiality is always changing. There's always innovation that's happening. This is part of evolution here on Earth. And when we're working with Uranus, we are working with innovation, revolution, and evolution. Nothing can stay the same forever. But in order to change, sometimes there needs to be disruption. And sometimes that disruption can be extremely upsetting or surprising. Uranus has, I believe, an 84-year orbit around the sun. It spends about 7 years in every sign. In 2025, it's going to be making its way out of Taurus and into Gemini, but throughout 2024, Uranus will remain in Taurus. As I mentioned, it first entered the sign in 2017. This influence has been radically destabilizing the Earth element. And Uranus in Taurus has been an era when, again, the climate crisis has accelerated. There has been rising consciousness around instability here on Earth. What was previously considered secure and stable really is no longer. I think a lot of people are feeling this who maybe haven't been feeling it up until now, that there's nowhere to go where climate chaos might not affect you. There's flooding, there's fires, there's earthquakes, there's melting glaciers, there are electrical storms. It's like heavy winds, there's all kinds of unpredictability in the actual atmosphere and the life on Earth right now. And this is a defining quality of our era. Uranus in Taurus has also created disruption and upheaval in stabilizing forces of the material realm. And economies and money is one Taurus ruled area. So since Uranus entered Taurus, there's been a destabilization of economies, like with Bitcoin and digital currencies. That's one way to think about this transit. There have also been a lot of destabilization in resources in general. And when I think of resources, I think of source. All wealth comes from the earth and is formed through labor. Since Uranus entered Taurus, there have been food shortages, there have been worker strikes, there have been mobilizations around resource extraction and misuse of resource. There have been all kinds of reasons for people to feel like they don't know if they're going to have what they need. Housing is definitely a Taurus kind of theme when it comes to basic needs. We are in a housing crisis right now. Taurus also relates with bodies and the material vitality of bodies, the fertile power of bodies. Uranus in Taurus is definitely figuring into a lot of what has been emerging, definitely here in the US, but all over the world when it comes to bodily autonomy and the rights of people who birth, access to abortion or gender affirming or life affirming care, and the need to awaken and innovate when it comes to the ways that we care for bodies. In the last year, Jupiter has also been in Taurus. Jupiter typically spends about 1 year in every sign, and it was in Taurus for a good chunk of 2023. In 2024, as I've mentioned, it will be leaving Taurus and moving into Gemini, but it will be in Taurus until May of 2024. Wherever Jupiter is, it is expanding. Jupiter is a symbol of growth. And in growth, we can get magnification of themes as well as learning from them. Jupiter is the traditional ruler of the sign Sagittarius. And so a lot of those themes and keywords that I was bringing in, talking about Sagittarius, could be applied to Jupiter as well. Truth seeking, wisdom wanting, big picture, and the feeling of growth in terms of consciousness. These are big themes for Jupiter. And so over the last year or 7 months or so, since I'm recording this in December, Jupiter's presence in Taurus has increased and magnified Uranian influences, unpredictability, change, suddenness, and upheaval in the earth realms. It is also facilitating greater awareness and expansion of consciousness because of these issues and predicaments. And it may be bringing new opportunities and generosities. These are keywords also for Jupiter, into the Taurus ruled parts of your chart and asking for growth there. And Jupiter is considered to be one of the social planets. And in this way, it describes the trends and the values of an era and how people are opening up their ideas about what is possible and where the growth potential is on a collective level. So on December 30th, Jupiter stations direct at 5 degrees of Taurus. And the 5th degree of Taurus is all about change. Nothing lasts forever. The symbol of this sign in the study of the Sabian symbols, which has to do with degree points in astrology, is a widow at an open grave. We have the end of all material attachments coming up at this degree point in Taurus. Now, over the last couple of months, almost 3 months now, you, like me, may have been really grieving and profoundly affected by the images coming through from Gaza and the slaughter of innocent people including Israelis, including Gazans, Palestinians. I think at this point, almost 20,000 Palestinians have been slaughtered by the Israeli government in an iteration of an ongoing war and genocide and occupation. Jupiter at this point, the way that I'm reading it, is as a symbol of awakening on a collective level towards impermanence. And again, a widow at an open grave is the symbol. The end of all material attachments. And I think that a lot of people, regardless of their political opinion or stance, a lot of people are feeling that what they thought they could count on before, they cannot count on now, that there is a kind of inherent meaninglessness in some ways with going on with the status quo, when so much of the status quo is so deeply invested in domination, brutality, and violence. I think a lot of folks are aware and educating themselves and expanding in their consciousness when it comes to the deeper conditions that would be facilitating this level of violence and brutality. And this level of violence and brutality did not just begin on October 7th. It didn't just begin 75 years ago. It didn't just begin some 200 years ago when the United States Declaration of Independence was drafted. These themes of human domination, of marginalization, oppression, and terror, campaigns of terror to eradicate and silence and erase groups of people or ways of thinking, ways of being and behaving. These themes are so deeply woven into the tapestry of human experience, and certainly over the last 500 or so years have been amplified in the resonance of colonial settler violence, but they didn't also begin there. When you look back at human history across the globe, you will find so many stories of domination, of violence, of oppression of certain groups of people, marginalization of certain genders, supremacy of particular embodiments or religions, etc. And so in our current era of white supremacist, capitalist, patriarchal modernity, there are very distinct needs to awaken to currents of power as they are currently manifesting. And I think to participate in a movement of global solidarity as we really grapple with the truth of impermanence. And as Jupiter stations direct, my feeling is that the confluence of unpredictability and the breakdown of material structures as described by Pluto in Capricorn, Uranus in Taurus, and Jupiter in this particular moment, the confluence of circumstances is creating a kind of urgency inside of not everybody, but a pretty large percentage or significant percentage of the human population. And it is catalyzing a reframing of values. And this is going to be a theme that I'm going to come back to quite a few times as we look ahead at 2024. But here I'm going to wrap up my read for Capricorn season in 2023. And I'm going to say that 2023 as a whole and Capricorn season as an instant inside of this year has been a time when there has been an immense backlash against forward-moving, progressive kind of activism and politics. And in that backlash, there is actually an accentuation and solidifying of what is progressive inside of the collective. People are becoming increasingly polarized and extreme. There are a lot of differences between backgrounds, ideologies, religions, and worldviews that are becoming amplified. But what happens when polarity is amplified, when extremes are becoming more and more starkly contrasted, is that the binaries actually start to break down. And I think that this is a big symbol for 2024. And at the end of 2023, this is certainly happening, that opposites kind of turn into each other. So as a person of Jewish descent who's in relationship with a lot of Jewish people, you know, a conversation that I'm having with folks in my realm, an important conversation that a lot of us are having right now has to do with the ways that the historic struggle of Jewish people to belong and experience safety and care, and to have homeland and to be able to live and practice in ways that are authentic for them. That struggle, that pain, that history of brutality that we carry in our bodies is being weaponized by fascist extremist governments that are heavily invested in military power and are now enacting the same brutality, genocide, policing, erasure, etc., on another group of people. And identities are breaking down. They're getting really challenged. Inside of a lot of solidarity movements, this happens frequently, right? And the ways that we understand how our identities have been constructed but entangled with one another are key in things breaking down. And so identities can be very forcibly protected. And we might think that, you know, oh, I am this thing. But there are frequently reasons and experiences that bring us into understanding that our identities depend on one another to maintain. The construction of race, for example, is a construction, it's a fabrication. The idea of whiteness needs blackness in order to maintain itself, and to some extent, vice versa. And so as we come to a moment where so much is intensified and pressurized on so many levels, environmentally, economically, socially, relationally, institutionally, ideologically, interpersonally, and internally, long-held structures are breaking down. In the breakdown, there is chaos, and chaos is the mother of invention. Chaos is an inherently creative and fertile place. And I think this is where we are entering 2024. So I'm going to stop my screen share for the moment, and I'm going to share a different image with you. So for folks who are just listening to the audio, I've just shared the image of the map that I've made for 2024. This astrology map describes visually to me the flow of astral influences throughout the year. Not everything is included here. That map would be way too complicated. But we have some pretty significant events included on this map. And if you are an Embodied Astrology member, I'll post this picture as well. So if you don't watch the video, you can also find the image there. So I'm going to talk through a little bit of 2024's astrology. And remember that this is a reading for the collective. I'm trying to describe through my own lens sensations as they occur to me in my access right now for experience and language. Again, take what works, leave the rest, fill it in for yourself. There's so much that's here. All right. We enter 2024 and Mercury stations direct. Mercury will station direct on January 1st at 22 degrees of Sagittarius. When I was talking about Capricorn season, I was talking about the new ideas for leadership and authority that are being asked for right now in consciousness. These new ideas are not yet formed. They are forming, and they're forming because of questions, because of frustration, because of the need to seek for otherwise. Mercury is stationing direct at a place in Sagittarius that is symbolic of a wide diversity of experience and also of migration. This Mercury station describes the transmission and flow of knowledge and cultural practices as people move either physically around the world or mentally and conceptually because of their access and exposure to difference. We, in our human experience, have never been so many people on planet Earth as we are right now. And it is really new, like incredibly new in terms of our biological, physiological, intellectual, psychic, and spiritual experiences that we're able to connect with each other so rapidly and so easily because a lot of people are walking around with computers in their hands. The access that we have to information now is unparalleled in human existence. This has never happened before, that individuals can be exposed to viewpoints, imagery, experiences, ideology of people from vastly different culture and society and language and cosmology and understanding. This is a moment of profound learning in human consciousness. As an astrologer, I spend a lot of time thinking about scales of time that are far beyond my own lifespan. This has created in me a real question about ideas of justice. And when I say justice, I'm not talking about any particular legal system. I'm talking about the human notion of cause and effect, that we think that we are entitled to anything, right? That we think that like, oh, life should be this for us or something like that. Studying these kinds of scales of time really does a thing to somebody's mind. And I tend to think about people and individuals more like cells in a body. And, you know, cells have a lifespan. Every 7 years, for example, your body will completely regenerate and you won't have any of the same cells. And so in our individual experiences, I don't know that that much really makes sense, TBH. We can make the meaning that's meaningful for us, and we do that in all kinds of ways. But I don't know if the human experience makes sense from the individual vantage. I think that we won't really know what it's all about until we are in another realm. This Mercury station retrograde at 22 degrees of Sagittarius will return to 8 degrees of Capricorn and finish its shadow phase over the course of the next couple of weeks, or the first few weeks of 2024. The shadow phase happens before and after the retrograde. And so even though Mercury has stationed direct on January 1st, it still isn't quite done with its retro cycle. And there are more questions than answers at this point. There's a impulsiveness to mental states right now at this point of a Mercury retrograde cycle, where foresight and hindsight are not particularly available, nor are they instinctual. There are new impulses and ideas emerging in consciousness, and there's a kind of urgency to move forward with them. So there's a feeling that as soon as we enter into the new calendar year, Jupiter has stationed direct and Mercury has stationed direct. And I think a lot of people are going to feel very energized and maybe activated or urgent to do things differently and do new things. And as we enter a new calendar year with this feeling that I was describing a moment ago with Jupiter, that nothing lasts forever and our values are shifting and material forms are changing, there's actually quite a lot of impetus and momentum to push against the status quo and to do things differently and to take risks. And this is a big feeling as we come into 2024. Fresh starts, new beginnings, risk-taking, and the excitement and challenge and danger and opportunity presented in these fresh starts and new beginnings. The first couple weeks of 2024, there is this impulse to move forward, but I will say that there's still a feeling of containment and uncertainty around how it's all going to work out. Now, we've got a couple things happening right at the end of January. There is a full moon in Leo on January 25th. And a day or two after that, Uranus in Taurus stations direct. Uranus is retrograde as we enter the year, but stations direct pretty soon into the year. And then on the 27th, Mercury and Mars will form a conjunction in Capricorn. And at this point, Mercury is done with its retro shade, its retrograde shadow. And then by the 28th, Mercury in Capricorn will form a trine to Uranus in Taurus. And so my feeling is that the month of January has impulse and energy for fresh starts, but pieces are coming together during this time. And I would caution folks to be mindful of hastiness and heedlessness. I would say that it is worth being with the frustration of not being quite ready, but slowing down and making sure that you are taking intentional and careful steps in the direction that you're wanting to go, that would be better than rushing unprepared and into it. The danger at this time being that all the information is not currently present and that there might be really big oversights. And so it could feel frustrating to slow down, but take the cue from Capricorn as an earth sign that is very invested in going the distance, to work systematically and thoroughly, breathe deep when frustrations come in, and cross your T's and dot your I's, as they say. Now, as we get into the end of January, I mentioned these aspects coming in the last week, but actually right before that, on January 20th, the Sun will form its annual conjunction with Pluto. And this is the last time that the Sun and Pluto will conjoin for over 2 centuries. Pluto has been in Capricorn since 2008. And by next year in Capricorn season, Pluto will be in Aquarius. And then we'll have Sun-Pluto conjunctions in Aquarius for about 20 years. And this is the last time in 2024 that the Sun and Pluto will meet. They are meeting at the anaretic degree at 29 degrees of Capricorn. And then right after that, both of them are ingressing Aquarius on January 20th. That's the first day of Aquarius season, and that is the first ingress of Pluto into Aquarius this year. Pluto made an ingress in 2023, in March of 2023. It only made it into the first degree of Aquarius before it stationed retrograde in May of last year, and then it moved back into Capricorn by June of 23, and it has been there since. But January 20th, it comes back into Aquarius. It will have one more visit to the last degree of Capricorn, so we're not totally into the new yet, but this increases the feeling of new beginnings. And I would say that those new beginnings then really get sparked the 25th through the 28th with the events that I mentioned, the full moon in Leo, Uranus station direct, and then these aspects from Mercury and Mars. So by the end of January, we are moving. And Aquarius, as a symbol and sign, relates with the future. The future is innovative and experimental. The future is collectively crafted and created. Aquarius is a sign that is associated with the people in plural, the people in terms of humanity, and the information and consciousness or awareness that can move between people as we give and receive information that allows us to evolve and uplift ourselves, or to change and transform. And so as Pluto enters Aquarius, and again, this started last year, and there's been something else that's been happening in Aquarius that I'll talk about in a little bit. But I would say since 2021, Aquarius has been a field that has been calling our consciousness towards it. But definitely in the last year, information is really changing human consciousness. As we enter into 2024, AI is a big thing on a lot of people's radar. What consciousness actually is, what intelligence is changing and evolving. Aquarius relates with science and technology and innovations in science and technology. In that sense, Aquarius also relates to social control. And the idea of surveillance technologies or corporation governance or something like that. Global police states. These are also very much symbolized in the potentials for the Aquarian age. I will also say that revolution of consciousness and coming together of the people in revolutionary ways are very emblematic of Aquarian potentials and ideals. The last time Pluto was in Aquarius was a very revolutionary time. The French Revolution and American Revolution occurred during that time. And moving into February, we have all of the personal planets also coming into Aquarius. Mercury enters Aquarius February 4th, Mars on February 12th, and Venus on February 16th. And as soon as they enter Aquarius, they form conjunctions with Pluto. And then because Aquarius is on the fixed cross with Taurus, Leo, and Scorpio, these planets will go on to square Jupiter and then Uranus in Taurus. And that full moon on January 25th in Leo will also be resonating with Pluto in Aquarius and squaring Jupiter pretty acutely and Uranus by sign. On February 9th, we also have a new moon in Aquarius, and this is a new moon that is squaring Uranus in Taurus. So these influences, as we move into February and throughout Aquarius season, to me describe a very revolutionary atmosphere where a lot is changing rapidly. Science, technology, and innovation are part of the changes that are happening. as are the people and the consciousness of the people. And when people are working together through organized movement and activism, a lot of change is happening. This will be a year that will definitely contribute to the growth of solidarity movements and strategic alliances across all kinds of people. And so one suggestion that I have for 2024 is to figure out, if you don't know already, who your people are, engage and participate with social movements, and work in creative collaboration and decentralized power structures to affect change. These influences are telling us that change happens when many pieces are mobilizing together. We do not have to be the same in order to work for the same outcomes or similar ideals. Lots of people, I'm gonna venture to say the majority of human beings alive on planet Earth would like stable housing and access to clean water and food. We might have enormous differences outside of that, but can we organize in solidarity around common goals and needs? This comes back again to the question of values and what we truly value, and the need to organize and orient ourselves around what we want to preserve, what we actually cherish. Materialism is passé in 2024. It is being canceled. And increasingly, I mean, it already has started, but increasingly, there will be trends against materialism. That's a prediction that I have. The wealthy elite, in a lot of ways, have already and are increasingly becoming social pariah. There's a consolidation of wealth for sure, and people with access to wealth and power typically mistrusting, insulating, and isolating themselves against the proletariat, us commoners or peasants. But we hold so much power, right? All wealth is created through labor, and resource comes from source, from the earth. And so when the people mobilize around our values, and when we reclaim our agency and connections with earth and with source, we are incredibly powerful and transformative. Throughout Pisces season, so as we transition from February into March, there are ongoing activations of the personal planets Venus and Mars in Aquarius in relationship to Jupiter and Uranus in Taurus. This is, again, it's a very revolutionary time. On February 28th, there's a triple conjunction of Mercury, Saturn, and the Sun. This is the superior conjunction of Mercury to the Sun. Again, Cazimi, wonderful word. But now in the superior conjunction, Mercury is on the far side of the Sun from Earth. And in the superior conjunction, we have more access to foresight and hindsight. There are increased possibilities for long-term planning and strategic vision. Saturn in conjunction with Mercury and the Sun also lends to long-term awareness, both towards the past and the potentials of the future. This conjunction is sextile with Jupiter in Taurus, and I think is really served by the unpredictability of the times, this feeling that nothing lasts forever. And when we really take that to heart, values change. Pisces, where this triple conjunction is occurring, is a sign of dissolving, of dissolution, of dismemberment. What was form now is no longer. Everything is going to go back into the mix. All water returns to the ocean. All bodies will return to the earth. And so the feeling here is increased empathy, compassion, feelings of connection across lines of distance and difference. This feels like a very powerful time for engaging with necessary creative dreaming work. So much of the impact of settler colonial modernity and white supremacist patriarchy has been to rob us of our ability to imagine otherwise. The narratives of this time tell us that we must be dependent upon these structures forever, and that is absolutely false. The need that we have to dream and imagine outside of this also is a need that sometimes can be hard to meet because dreaming requires spaciousness. It's really hard to dream and imagine and feel creative when every day is a struggle to get by. And so this is a period of time, I think, when a lot of people are mobilizing to create dreaming spaces. Just giving a nod to Trisha Hersey and the Nap Ministry and her work with Rest as Revolution. In Embodied Astrology next year, one of our amazing facilitators, Sherry Taylor, is working with the dark moon and dreaming space. She's been working with Saturn and Pisces over the last year. And this kind of dissolving and congealing process in alchemy and alchemical transformation. Another one of our fabulous facilitators, Gabs 404, will be holding space for queer time experimentation and really lingering in the otherwise where new potentials can manifest and emerge. I think there's going to be a lot of need for this kind of space, these kinds of creative, dreaming, ideating spaces in 2024. And I think that February and March will be a very rich and fertile time that a lot of people are longing for something else, something different, something new. And in that space of longing, we actually have so much connection. There's a lot of solidarity that's possible, because I think that at the core of what a lot of people long for, there are very similar sentiments and sensations. As we move out of Pisces season and into Aries season, you can see on this drawing these kind of diamond shapes, we are entering into eclipse season. Now, eclipses happen in sets. We generally will have 2 eclipses about 2 weeks apart from each other at the new moon and the full moon. And then these sets of eclipses happen twice per year. So our first set of eclipses comes in Aries season in 2024. We'll have an eclipse on March 25th at 5 degrees of Libra. This is a lunar eclipse. This eclipse really resonates with themes and symbols of teaching and the transmission of imagery and story and possibility as we model to one another and as we connect across our differences. The power of transmission is really something that becomes emphasized when pleasure and equity and justice get centered. We are so different. Everybody is really different. Difference is not the enemy at all. The earth in its fertile abundance requires vast biodiversity. Our differences are essential and necessary. We don't need to go to war about them. We can learn so much from one another by coming into presence with respect for one another's dignity and curiosity about each other's experience. And so this lunar eclipse, I think, really asks us to feel into the power of our minds to meet others. And in the power of our minds, we have judgment. And there's so much judgment wrapped up in narratives around identity. And I think that with the South Node currently transiting through Libra, and that means a releasing point, a shedding space, and a need to evolve beyond what has currently been here, notions of identity, as I mentioned before, are breaking down. And in this, there's a lot of solidarity potential as people learn about one another's backgrounds and ancestral and intergenerational struggles and influences. But there also is a new kind of meeting one another and a recognition that in order to move forward, there does need to be accountability to what has happened and to the past, but we also have to embrace new notions of potentiality in our evolving identities. Because in a lot of ways, the identities that many of us walk with and work with are constructed by oppressive, dominant forces. So again, the construction of racial identity was an intentional construction in order to separate people who were coming together in solidarity against those who were enslaving and indenturing servitude, against those who were extracting and hoarding wealth. And racial construction is psychological, it is spiritual, it is physiological, it is physical. It manifests in the conditions of our world in really real ways. People are treated enormously different based on a system of pigmentocracy. And so we have to deal with the reality of that while we also work with the concept to evolve our notions of identity and difference. And so my feeling about this lunar eclipse is that identities are breaking down and new allegiances are being formed across across differences that used to be barriers, that in certain ways they are barriers no longer. And so this theme of values becomes really important again. We can resonate with people around shared or similar values. And a lot of times we find people in our same identity groups don't actually resonate with our same values. Sometimes there's an agreement around shared experience. But this is definitely a time when the notion of value is first and foremost, I think, what's on the table when it comes to solidarity and alliance building. And in that, there is a recalibrating around themes of justice and equity. These are big themes for Libra. And we want to present possibilities to one another. This is what the world could look like. I think this is a very powerful eclipse for folks who are doing abolition work and the folks that are doing like the creative reimagining that is essential for abolition. What could the world look like if we didn't rely on carceral punishment to create order, like to uphold social order? What if instead of carceral punishment, we gave people access to housing and food and education and mental health services? Totally different possibilities. With that, I'll also give a nod to another of EA's amazing facilitators, Junauda Petrus, who is an author and playwright and a creative leader in the work of abolition. She wrote a children's book a couple of years ago called Can We Please Just Give the Police Department to the Grandmothers? She is leading full moon groups at EA over the course of the year. So there will be monthly opportunities to drop in with Junauda. And she's going to be offering support space for all kinds of different ways we can take astrology into the realms of relationship, into the realms of creative practice, thinking about how we connect with ourselves at different ages. And her work, I think, really entirely is about healing internally and externally and tending the social fabric in our continuities. 2 weeks after the March 25th lunar eclipse in Libra, we have a total solar eclipse in Aries at 19 degrees of Aries. This eclipse is conjunct the centaur planet Chiron, and it's squaring Ceres in Cancer. This eclipse to me feels like it is resonating with a lot of themes that bring our attention to toxic individualism and toxic masculinity. It doesn't matter what gender you are, toxic masculinity has harmed you. The idea that people with penises should be soldiers, right? They're going to be shaped into soldiers from the day that they're born is so harmful to everybody on the planet. The idea that individuals can somehow succeed without the support of community or other people or the earth itself is absolutely insane. The momentum of heroic ideals as they have been incorporated for a long time, I would say that these ideals are fundamental to the Roman Empire and its solar heroes. Therefore, in the lineages of Catholicism and Christianity and European worldviews and Western modernity, the idea of the hero is such a cherished idea. And the hero is uplifted at the expense of everybody else, right? So many movies out there just celebrating toxic individualism and toxic masculinity, dudes with big muscles and guns running around, like killing all kinds of people. You never even know who they were, that they exploded in that car chase back there, as long as they, you know, succeed in the end and finish the bank heist or whatever. This is not a model to continue with. This is not a model that has brought well-being into our lives. This is a hyper-stimulating model. It really resonates in the sympathetic nervous system. It brings us into our fight and flight responses. Conjunct with Chiron, I would say that this solar eclipse definitely gets at the intergenerational wound patterns of toxic masculinity and toxic individualism. And around the time of this eclipse, I would imagine that we would see plenty of examples of this in the world. Shootings, right? Most of the mass shootings, now it's been several decades that these have been kind of frequent occurrences. Overwhelmingly, the shooters are cis men. Overwhelmingly, they are white cis men. They are people often who, you know, suffer some kind of mental illness, and I would say mental derangement, produced by a sick society. Folks who are adamantly trying to protect and defend their identity group, or who are quite mentally imbalanced and really believing in some kind of hallucination of difference. And in that hallucination, very violent and extreme. Again, these examples, right? These episodes of these larger currents of collective dis-ease are catalysts for social transformation. I wish that they didn't have to happen for people to transform in their consciousness. But I guess this is the era that we're living in. We're living in an era where the multifold manifestation of systemic historic violence is becoming grossly obvious. And hopefully, and I really just have nothing more than hope here, hope and a prayer. Hopefully, there's enough capacity inside of human consciousness to recognize that we have to change internally in order to change the external. So when we change the stories that we're telling to little kids about who they get to be, when we start giving kids with any genitals, storybooks that allow them to be who they want to be rather than a societal prescription. When we start listening to children tell us who they are, right, and support them in living in integrity with their own authenticity, instead of subjecting them to dominant culture's ideas about who they should be because of their fucking genitals, we might have more creative options emerging in human consciousness. During this time between eclipses, in the eclipse window, there's frequently, I find, in eclipse times, a really uncanny kind of atmosphere. I feel eclipses as very time bendy. The past and the future are intersecting. The symbolism of eclipses brings us to notions of karma and cause and effect, consequences producing equal and opposing reactions and actions over time. At eclipse times, the idea is that karma is ripening and that the conditions of the past are being presented to us in the present moment so that we can potentially change. And as the conditions of the past are presented in the current moment, the key is awakening to the deeper patterns. How did we get here? Why is this happening on a systemic, intergenerational, ancestral level? What has happened that has brought us to this point? And how are these attitudes, mindsets, lineages, inheritances, and histories internalized? Another of our fabulous facilitators, Ramon Gabrieloff Parrish, and his wife, Michelle, they will be holding a couple of conversations over the course of 2024. And Ramon is an astrologer and is going to be part of our core faculty this year. Ramon and Michelle don't always work together. They're gonna work together with us a few times, and then I think Ramon is doing a couple of things on his own. I'll also be working with them if folks want to hang out with me in person this year, or hang out with us in person. Ramon is hosting a kind of pop-up Afrofuturist, Astrofuturist festival at Naropa University in Boulder, Colorado in April. I'm going to talk to you in a minute about the astrological event that is going to be centered then. And then later in October, I'm forgetting the dates right now, I think it's around the end of October, Michelle, Ramon, and I will co-facilitate a retreat at the Eco Dharma Center, also in Colorado. So if you're interested in any of those events, definitely stay tuned with me and Embodied Astrology. But anyway, where was I going with this? I was going to talk about Ramon and Michelle's work with conflict mapping and how they are creating space inside of Embodied Astrology this year to use astrology as a means to navigate around and through and with conflict and difference. And this need to understand how systems continue and perpetuate. Ramon and Michelle talk a lot about the 4 I's of oppression: the ideological, the institutional, the interpersonal, and the internal. And when we're interested in the work of change, we have to address change on all of those levels. And when we have eclipses in Libra and Aries, we have eclipses in a fundamental axis of human experience. Aries represents the individuated self, the me, myself, and I experience. You live in a body. Your body is unique. You are having a differentiated experience, and that needs to be protected and understood and respected and advocated for. You don't exist alone. I don't exist alone. We are here totally entangled with each other, embedded in life. And life is relational on all levels in multiple direction. And we need to stay in balance with one another. There needs to be reciprocity, mutuality, and exchange in order for us to experience harmony and peace and beauty in our lives. And this is what the axis of Aries Libra illuminates for us. And so during this period of time, I think a lot of folks are really working the individual and the relational levels of change, and how we orient towards change, again, has to take our differences into account. Our differences hold the keys to our survival. We're not going to survive by all saming ourselves and becoming homogenous. We are going to survive and thrive when we really support true, authentic individuation of people and communities. And that means people being able to give their gifts, bring their full selves, express themselves in the ways that allow them to give their gifts and realize their skills. So in this window between eclipses, prepare yourself to be confronted with some of the wound patterns that would inhibit individuated expression, and that would result from that inhibition, from the suppression of life force in individuals. And life force is relational. And so where individuals become isolated in their differences, where they become xenophobic or terrified of difference, and then terrorize others who they perceive as other, those circumstances are plentiful in our world. There's lots of examples. But again, the experience of living through times that give us increasing and multifold examples of certain kinds of sensations or experiences allow us to transform and to build consciousness. Now, during this time between eclipses, we are also going to be working with a Mercury retrograde, yay, in Aries, okay, just to make it a little bit more spicy. Mercury stations retrograde at 27 degrees of Aries on April 1st. It will station direct on April 25th at 15 degrees of Aries. So as we get the first eclipse on March 25th, Mercury is fully in its shadow. Between or inside of Mercury's retrograde, we have the second eclipse, and then post-eclipse, we're working out of Mercury retrograde and still very much in the shadow. This retrograde is in Aries. And so this is a period of time when these ideas of individualism and individuated expression, bodily autonomy and sovereignty, the power of individuals and the power of individuals relating with one another are going to be amplified. In your personal chart, consider where Aries is. What house does it rule? What does it rule? What are the Aries ruled placements? This is a site for incredible emergence and growth for you in 2024. And I get into that for sure in your 2024 year ahead readings. The day that we leave Aries season, so the very first day of Taurus season on April 20th, we have one of 2024's biggest astrological events, and that is the conjunction of Jupiter and Uranus at 22 degrees of Taurus. So this is the Astro event that Ramon's festival at Naropa is going to be centering. And I'm going to be there. God willing, I'm going to travel to Colorado and get to hang out for this incredible occurrence. Would love to see you there. Jupiter expands, it grows, it invites us into wisdom, it brings us into the longing for deeper understanding. Uranus awakens, it liberates and revolutionizes, sometimes through disruption. And certainly in the sign of Taurus, we have change happening. And change is a site of disruption and upheaval, and change is also the lesson. It is no coincidence that the work of Octavia Butler has been elevated and celebrated so much since Uranus went into Taurus, that her parable series have been read so widely in the last several years. Octavia was a prophet, and she told us through such a beautiful, poetic, and descriptive story over and over again that God is change and change is God, and that we shape change and we are shaped by change. And so when we involve ourselves in the work of evolution, we do not fear change, we embrace it. We look for the openings and we get creative inside of it. Taurus as an energy doesn't particularly like change, even though it is change, right? That's the nature of life. The nature of life is to want stability and comfort and certainty. Life seeks to preserve itself, but individuated life forms can't always see the big picture. We don't always know that change that's happening is our necessary evolution. Sometimes it just feels like a huge headache or totally terrifying. And so Jupiter conjunct with Uranus at 22 degrees of Taurus really resonates so deeply with the themes of values and shifting values. And so again, I will ask, what do you truly value? What do you truly cherish? And what do you truly wish to preserve? And where you are attached, explore the attachment. If you are attached to certain ideas of material comfort, you might not be satisfied living life on Earth at this particular time. Folks who have a certain degree of economic or financial stability in 2023 and 2024 might feel themselves feeling increasingly unsafe as more and more people experience scarcity and lack. And this is something that happens with wealth and power, that the more someone gets of it, the more attached they are to it, and the more fearful they are of losing it. That instinct to attach and become possessive actually inhibits wealth. It reduces safety. It works as an antithesis to true stability or security. If you want abundance in your life, invest in generosity. Give deeply and freely and joyfully to those around you, and you will be a recipient of their generosity. People don't have all of the same things to give each other. So just because you have some money to give doesn't mean that somebody else is going to give you back cash, but they might give you back a home-cooked meal. They might be there for you when you need solace or comfort. They might have some skills that they could help you out at some point. When we share with one another, there is plenty. That is a reality of the earthly plane. There is abundance here. It is due to hoarding and greed that scarcity exists. Conditions of generosity produce abundance. That to me is the symbol of this conjunction at 22 degrees of Taurus. And if I was going to give astrological advice, which I like to do, I would say invest in generosity. You don't have to give everything that you have away. It is okay to take care of your own needs and to keep some for yourself. That is also required for sustainability. But learning to share and considering collective value and collective need is looking out for your own ass in the future. If your family and community are resourced, you will be resourced. If you're hoarding and the people around you are hurting, you're fucking scared of losing what you have. So conditions of generosity produce abundance. abundance proliferates in conditions of generosity. About a month later, so we're going to get into May, and then by middle of May, on May 18th, Jupiter and the Sun meet up for their Cazimi, almost at the end of Taurus, 28 degrees of Taurus. And the same day, Venus, Taurus's planetary ruler, will conjoin Uranus in Taurus. Venus and Jupiter will be sharing the sign of Taurus at this point and fairly close to one another. Venus and Jupiter are both considered to be the benefics of the planetary pantheon, the gift givers, the pleasure bringers. When they come together, there is support. And they are here right now with the Sun, with consciousness, with vitality, with life force, and with Uranus, innovation, rebellion, revolution, and change. The day after, Mars in Aries will form its conjunction with the North Node, or the eclipse point. This is a really powerful time of the year. And I'm going to say that the first 4 or 5 months of the year is kind of like building to this part of the year. And there's so much revolutionary potential right now. Now, there's also a lot of upheaval. I'm not going to lie to you. 2024 does not need an astrologer to tell you that climate-related events are going to be increasing and intensified. This has been a theme now for several years. Any climate scientist that's not in a corporate pocket is telling us the same thing. We are going to need to be adapting and evolving rapidly over the next several years if human existence or life on Earth is going to continue in any way, shape, or form in a sustainable or abundant way. A lot of changes are going to need to happen. New technologies, artificial intelligence, and innovation, that's going to be part of this. And the people and the Earth definitely have to be part of it. And the way that people work with Earth, I think, is in an enormous moment of renaissance and revolution. And in that is a lot of remembering and reclaiming and hopefully accountability and apology and repair and redress work with Indigenous communities and land protectors and people who have known how to live in harmony with the Earth and in balance with the Earth forever, and largely whose voices have been ignored and whose lives have been taken and continue to be threatened. In this era that we are entering into, the land back movement and solidarity with Indigenous communities, I think, will build a lot of momentum and charge, because more and more people are recognizing that the mind states and worldviews of white supremacist capitalist modernity are not aligned with actual surviving and thriving here on planet Earth. As we move out of May and into June, right at the end of May, another one of 2024's big astrological events is happening. And this is the ingress of Jupiter into Gemini. So as I mentioned a while ago, Jupiter spends about 1 year in each sign, and Jupiter will stay in Gemini from May 25th, 2024 until June 10th, 2025. For everybody who has Gemini placements, this is a good aspect for you. Again, Jupiter is the great benefic. Some will say the Santa Claus of the zodiac, bringing opportunities and abundance. I don't really think of any symbols in astrology as black and white, good and bad. I think that they all bring a lot of potential. And so wherever Jupiter is, we are on a learning journey. There is necessary seeking and expansion that happens there. And sometimes wisdom results from mistakes, because one of the ways that humans learn the best is by fucking up, right? It's the fuck around and find out kind of predicament that we find ourselves in. And so Gemini placements are in a moment of fucking around to find out. And this is a great time to try new things. So Jupiter enters Gemini with Venus, and both of the benefics are here at the beginning of this transit, which I think is a good omen and a supportive one. As Jupiter comes into Gemini, it is moving into a sign in the air triplicity. And this is important because back in 2021, Jupiter and Saturn made a conjunction at the first degree of Aquarius. And so I think I referenced this a while ago when I was saying something about Pluto in Aquarius. And I was like, there was this other thing that happened a while ago. I'll talk about that later. So now we've reached later and I'll talk about it. In 2021, Jupiter and Saturn formed a conjunction at the very first degree of Aquarius. Jupiter and Saturn come together every 20 years for a conjunction. They are considered to be the social planets. In this delineation, they are differentiated from the personal planets, Mercury, Venus, and Mars, which describe more of our personal experiences here, our personhoods, our personalities, communication, relationship, desire, action, etc. Jupiter and Saturn have significant orbits around the sun when it comes to a human time frame. Jupiter takes 12 years to travel around the sun. Saturn takes about 29 years to travel around the sun. These are chunks of time inside of a human life that mean something. Mercury, on the other hand, travels around the sun in about 90 days. There's a kind of quickness to the personal planets that describes the fluctuating day-to-day experiences that we have in our personhoods and personalities. But when we're thinking about spans of time like 12 years or 30 years, we're really in many ways thinking about personal growth and what can happen over time. Jupiter and Saturn both relate to culture and society, and the values and trends and ideals and worldviews that are present at certain times in certain places. Jupiter presents us with the opportunities for growth, with the desires for expansion and kind of what's coming in and helping us to explore what's new. Trends are a good way to think about Jupiter's cycle. Saturn, on the other hand, talks about the limitations and boundaries of current eras and often relates to values, where we, in our own internal experiences, brush up against the trends and the values of society and the current era, describe a lot of how we'll grow in our personal development. And so as young people, we are, for the most part, in the realm of the trends and values of our immediate families or our neighborhoods or, you know, the school that we go to or something like that. But then when people go to high school or college or get to that age, you know, and they maybe are leaving what is more familiar to them. I know that's not everybody's cultural norm, like as it is in America, or something that people would leave home. But there are certain times in our life, right, where we're going to explore beyond what is familiar in terms of what we came into. And then we're going to have to kind of push against the values or trends that our parents had or our early lives had. And definitely as people travel, as they encounter difference in possibility, difference in trends, different in societal values, they change in how they feel and see themselves and their own possibilities. So in 2021, Jupiter and Saturn formed their once every 20-year conjunction. And these conjunctions, called the Great Conjunctions, as I mentioned, happen every 20 years. And astrologers view them as important chapters in the development of era and what's happening in culture and society and kind of like the collective experience. Because of their synodic cycles, the length of their orbits around the sun, respectively, Jupiter and Saturn's great conjunctions happen in signs of the same element for about 200 years. For the last 200 years, until 2000, Jupiter and Saturn conjunctions were in Earth element signs. This was an era, we think about the last 200 years, when the Earth element, in terms of industry, wealth, capital, monuments to power, building, mining, things like that, have very much produced culture and society. There's often a little bit of a wobble at either end of these 200-year cycles. And sometimes that means that a conjunction will form in another element and then go back. So actually in 1980, there was the first Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in the air element in the sign Libra. In 2000, they had a conjunction in Taurus. But then in 2021, Jupiter-Saturn conjoined the first degree of Aquarius. And now for the next 200 years, their conjunctions will be in the air element. And so a lot of astrologers see this as the beginning of the Aquarian age. Some people might also call this the age of information or the age of technology. The air element relates to information and the mind. It relates to science. When we're working with the air element, we are working with creativity and the capacity of consciousness and intelligence. And as we move into the 2030s and beyond, I think that we're going to experience a really big flux in what society looks like. And this is the beginning of it, my perspective in 2023, as Pluto entered Aquarius. AI shows up in 2023, but the seeds of AI were planted back in 1980, when the internet began, the first conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn in the air element in Libra, for example. So over the next 200 years, our society is going to transform remarkably. And again, it can be hard to imagine this inside of the current paradigm, but I'm 40 this year. And when I just think back to like, what was life like in the 80s and the 90s? In some ways it wasn't that different, but in some ways it was really different. Folks who are older than me can probably remember even more massive change. So keep this in mind as you experience what 2024 is bringing. And I think that there is a lot in flux in 2024. And a lot of human beings have a hard time with change. We can get pretty fearful when what is known and familiar is threatened. But there's a lot of creative potential coming in. And as Jupiter moves into Gemini, I think we're really going to feel the rapid pace of change starting to accelerate. Now, I forgot to mention that back in the beginning of May, on May 2nd, Pluto stationed retrograde at 2 degrees of Aquarius. And over the course of the next couple months, Pluto will be moving back into Capricorn. I'll talk more about that in a little bit, but I did want to mention that because the outer planets are retrograde for a good chunk of the year. They don't typically produce such acute, prophecies or predictions as the inner planet retrogrades like Mercury, Venus, and Mars from astrologers. But they are periods of time that integration can happen. And so I said a while ago, the first 5 months of the year feel like there's a lot of acceleration It feels like a lot of fresh starts and new beginnings and risk taking and the excitements and the challenges and the dangers and the opportunities. When we get to May, and as Jupiter moves into Gemini, my feeling is that it's not that the pace slows down, but that there's a kind of new level of comfort and familiarity with the changes that are happening, and people are gripped less to the old ways and more excited about the new ways. And so as Pluto is stationing retrograde, my feeling is that a lot of folks are trying to integrate what they feel calling them from the future. And so there's going to be a focus on changing systems. That's pretty important focus for a good chunk of 2024. And as Jupiter comes into Gemini, it increases that feeling for me. Now, Gemini is a sign that is associated with learning and communication. It's a Mercury-ruled sign. So a lot of what I was talking about in the beginning of the reading with Mercury retrograde, we can think about in relationship to Gemini. Gemini is curious. It is connective. It is multiplicitous and multifaceted. It is always thinking about options and alternates because that's what information does. The art of conversation is a big theme for Gemini placements, and adaptability is a priority for Gemini. So Jupiter is entering into Gemini, into an air sign, and it is trine now to the placement of its conjunction with Saturn back in 2021. And so these themes of a new age, the age of information, the Aquarian age, a time when people are connecting because they're curious and willing to learn, when people are connecting across lines of difference. And therefore, there's a proliferation of creativity and capacity and people-powered movements because folks are working together in new ways. These are suggested and amplified by Jupiter in Gemini. Now, I haven't really spoken much about Saturn at all yet in this reading, and I definitely could have and maybe should have, because Saturn is the traditional ruler of Aquarius and Capricorn. There's a lot that's going on in Aquarius and Capricorn this year. I'll say a little bit right now, but I'll talk more about Saturn in a couple of minutes. Saturn is traveling through Pisces in 2024. And Pisces is a sibling sign of Gemini. They both are occupants of the mutable cross. Mutability is adaptability. It is the capacity to change. Gemini, Pisces, Sagittarius, and Virgo are the four mutable signs. There's one mutable sign for each element, and all of these signs change inside of their element. And so Gemini, as an air sign, changes thought and information and consciousness and conversation. It introduces new elements and options. Pisces, as a water sign, where Saturn currently is, changes emotion and sentiment. Water as an element that is connected to the inner body and subjective experience in the emotional realm. Pisces suggests fluid, changing emotional experiences that have a lot to do with compassion, empathy, and transmission. Saturn in Pisces is bringing gravity and weight and seriousness to the emotional vibrations between us and in our interstitial spaces. This is a time of immense grief. And as circumstances become amplified and stories are shared, about struggle and suffering and loss, compassion and empathy expands. And as compassion and empathy expand, we have increasing responsibility and necessity to integrate this information and act and enact accordingly. So there's a high degree of responsibility that people are feeling right now, I think, on the emotional level. And as Jupiter comes into Gemini, it begins to square Saturn. And over the course of the next couple of months, and in 2024, we'll have 2 Jupiter square Saturn events. And I'm going to talk about those in a little bit. But I will say that as Jupiter moves into Gemini, it is trine to that original Saturn-Jupiter conjunction point at the beginning of Aquarius. And there is a lot of emphasis right now on sharing information and connecting with each other through curiosity, through storytelling. There's a need to cultivate our capacities for conversation. And that means that we have to practice listening as well as sharing our own stories. This theme of binary oppositional difference collapsing, that I think is a big theme currently, for me is emphasized with Jupiter in Gemini. And the feeling here is that differences do become starkly contrasted. There is tension. It's not that we're all understanding each other or getting along, but it's that the reason, the motivation to understand where other people are coming from becomes an increasing imperative. And in order to move into the future, to do what we need to do, we got to get enough people power. And in order to get people power, we need to talk to each other. And so Jupiter in Gemini is asking us to hold complexities and to respond to one another in ways that aren't didactic or pedantic. Gemini is not here to tell us what to do. Gemini is here to suggest and make jokes and infer and look for options and then be kind of a trickster about it. And so the ways that we connect with one another necessarily need to reshape our communication pathways and the habits of comprehension that we hold. As another aside, I'm just going to say that astrology is such a powerful and valuable tool for working with complexity. I have benefited so much as a highly opinionated person, very judgmental person. I've benefited so much from astrology and from working with astrology. I feel like being able to connect with people through our charts allows for so much compassion and understanding and curiosity to emerge. Over the course of 2024, I will be offering a continuation of the foundations class that I taught several years ago now, called Your Chart is a Body. That course is currently offered as a standalone self-paced course on my website on embodiedastrology.com. And it offers all the fundamentals for chart reading through a somatic experiential lens. So learning to read planets and signs and houses and aspects with one another, and considering transits, kind of understanding chart wheels, how to read them, their directions, etc. That's all part of that course. But instead of teaching you theory and asking you to memorize mathematics, I take an approach that is physical, experiential, and embodied. And to me, this is just such a powerful tool for working in community and building really dynamic, supportive, and generative relationships. So if you, like me, are interested in the work of evolving consciousness and becoming a, more multidimensionally adept human being on earth. I'm just here to pitch astrology. So come hang out with me in Your Chart is a Body. I'm going to be offering a new monthly chart work series where we're doing together a lot of chart reading and working with that self-paced class in real time. I have to stay hydrated. I'm talking so much. Okay. Okay, so we get into June, and I'm going to say one more thing about Gemini. On June 4th, the Venus Cazimi occurs. So the conjunction of Venus to the Sun at 14 degrees of Gemini. This is a complement to the inferior conjunction of Venus and the Sun, which occurred in 2023. Venus had a retrograde in Leo between July 22nd and September 4th. Venus goes retrograde about once every 2.5 years. And Venus's retrogrades are pretty powerful, I think, in the realms of personal self-regard or self-esteem and security and security issues, and also our relationships and how we relate with our values. And so if you think back to July through September of 2023, what was coming up for you at that time in terms of how you relate with yourself, how you relate with others, and maybe particularly your values or questions of value. June of 2024 is a kind of reflection point for a lot of those themes. And Venus in Gemini really opens up the symbolism and the metaphor of Gemini as being a place of learning and growth of consciousness, because learning and growth of consciousness absolutely require relationship. Curiosity and attention are such important currencies. When we give true curiosity and true attention to one another, it is such a gift. And to be a recipient of someone's authentic curiosity and attention sometimes can, be a little like, oh, you're looking at me. Like maybe, it could be a little nerve-wracking or something for some of us. But oftentimes it's just such flattery. And when we feel true curiosity, there is so much openness possible. And this is the amazing thing about kids, right? People who, around the Gemini ages, like maybe between age 3 and 7 or so, are just learning rapidly. Something like 70,000 new neural connections are being made per day, whereas in an adult mind, it's something like 4, if there's even any. Because meaning is being made, right? We're learning language. We are in a space of imagination. There's kind of infinite possibility. Our minds haven't been closed yet by other people's rules and formulations of meaning. And so accessing curiosity is such powerful and potent medicine. And I would say that one of the practices that I'm really going to engage in 2024 is a curiosity practice. And I work with this a lot. If you've ever come to one of my somatic space classes, you may have encountered a practice like this, where there's really attention to detail. And you can try this right now. So if you look around, or if you're not sighted, you can listen or you can feel, but try and attune yourself perceptually to really subtle details in what it is that you're perceiving. Just choose one point to focus on. You might listen, through one of your ears, or you might bring your touch to one part of your body, or look in one particular direction at a particular object or being. And notice as many details as you can and really get subtle and minuscule about it. And as you do that, you might notice that your nervous system responds. And when we really slow down and when we really notice details, there is a natural regulating that happens in the autonomic nervous system. This happens between people as well. And so when you come into contact with another human being, if you pause in your contact and really take some time to get curious, just perceptually, not asking questions necessarily, but just noticing, bringing yourself into attunement with another person, allowing yourself to feel how it is to be in their presence, like noticing their energy, noticing their breath, noticing the details of their countenance. That is a bonding act. That's a gesture of relationality. And when we do that with each other, we co-regulate. And co-regulation is an enormous part of transmission and a really important facet of learning. And if we want to evolve in our relationships at all with anybody, we have to be curious about each other. We have to be willing to slow down and suspend our ideas and beliefs about who the other person is. We have to be willing to encounter them in the present moment as a living, breathing, energetic being. And when we notice the details of one another, the co-regulation that happens opens up so much potentiality. And when people co-regulate with each other, there's naturally more safety in the relationship. There's naturally more compassion and care. As Jupiter moves into Gemini, one of my prayers is that co-regulating will become really, really trendy, that it will be something that, you know, everybody's making videos about on TikTok and news anchors are doing with their audiences and things like that. And I would say that there's a good case for this as we move into June, because June 11th, Mars in Taurus will square Pluto in Aquarius. Now, I don't know if this is a really co-regulating aspect. I would say that this feels potentially quite confrontational. Mars square Pluto is pretty combustive. But that said, I'm going to make a case for this being an aspect of embodied attunement and sensate awareness, changing consciousness. Now, since Uranus went into Taurus back in 2017, the realms of embodiment have expanded and innovated and revolutionized in so many different ways. I've been practicing somatic practices, or, you know, whatever. I've been a somatic explorer since age 11. That's when I started. I'm 40 years old. It's almost 3 decades of my life that I have been studying some kind of somatic techniques or methods. I will, as an aside, say that somatic practice is ancient. It is indigenous. It is essentially what a lot of, you know, like the Eastern practices, yoga, Qigong, Tai Chi, the martial arts, dance practices from every single culture, so many spiritual and prayer practices, earth-based practices, they are all somatic. The field of somatics, like many things, is a kind of moment of like Western consciousness grasping something that people everywhere have known forever. And, you know, we have new language for it. And the realm of somatics is also connecting with the realm of science and neuroscience and physiology. And we're learning a lot from those perspectives about what somatic practice can do. And what somatic practice really does very effectively is regulate the autonomic system and produce states of well-being in the body. And that well-being then can be transmitted and translated relationally. And when we are regulated in our autonomic nervous systems, we are safer people to be around and we tend to be happier. and we tend to be vastly more intelligent and make wiser and more skillful decisions. So I'm going to make a case for June 11th, Mars in Taurus, squaring Pluto in Aquarius, to be a time to fight for, somatic intelligence across all levels of society. This would be a great transit to like time some kind of somatic uprising. These events that people have done where like everybody around the world on the same day meditates or something like that. And those events have actually been proven to be effective, that when a lot of people come together to attune in consciousness, rates of violence go down, rates of well-being go up. There are different kinds of impacts that have been measured. So if you're a person that likes to organize that kind of thing and you're listening to this sometime earlier than June 11th, this would be a great aspect to work with. In other realms, I'm going to say that this aspect could definitely resonate with many kinds of uprising and revolution and protest. The Taurus ruled realms of housing and earth and economies and bodies, basic security, sustenance, stability, and survival, and the earth itself are certainly going to be focal points in this time of massive change and systemic societal transformation. This is the vibe as we move into July and August. Mars will form a conjunction with Uranus in Taurus on July 15th. They're forming a conjunction at 26 degrees of Taurus. This is where the fixed star Algol is. Algol is Medusa. You might be familiar with the Medusa myth. I've been thinking a lot about this myth since the eclipses in 2020 and 2020, or was it 2021 and 22 in Taurus and Scorpio aspected this point. And one of many ideas that emerges for me thinking about this point is what happens with trauma and the freeze state of trauma, and how freeze in our physiology, in our psychic, spiritual, relational realms becomes a death force. And frozenness is inability to act. It produces a misuse of power through underuse of power or complicity with violence. It contributes to numbing. It can definitely be preservational, but what is it preserving? I mean, a freeze state is kind of trying to preserve basic functions, but it's not necessarily moving in the direction of life. Mars conjunct with Uranus is a very explosive aspect. And I don't want to forecast tragedy. I think that tragedy is part of human experience. It's part of life on Earth. Being alive on Earth is traumatic. Birth is traumatic. Death is traumatic. Transformation is trauma. Revolution is trauma. There are so many themes throughout the year that produce really explosive kinds of vibrations. The Jupiter-Uranus conjunction on April 20th being one of them. Mars is square to Uranus on March 9th, conjunct with Uranus, as I mentioned, on July 15th. Mars is square to Pluto on June 11th. I don't know with these dates what is being presented, but I can say that there is explosive, volatile, earth-shaking kinds of vibes that come in. And we can mobilize in skillful ways around these themes. If we're going to use astrology, we want to think about astrology basically as a bus schedule. And so one thing that I would say, and I'm saying this to myself too, because I have not done this yet and I really need to, but one thing I would say for 2024 is have your emergency preparedness plans ready to go. That's something that Michelle Gabrieloff-Parrish and Ramon are going to be working with us in the EA community on this year, is thinking about community preparedness for climate crisis, for financial crisis, for housing crisis. Systems are breaking down right now. A lot of the systems are not working. And so, yes, there's fear here because there's instability, because there's loss, because there's violence. That's inherent. And there's creative potential, there's transformative potential. So get your go bags ready, get your emergency preparedness plans in place. And beyond that, how are you going to contribute to the revolution? We have a lot that's happening in earth and air throughout the year in pretty volatile combinations. Now, earth is the material realm, air is the informational realm. You can contribute and participate with the revolution through your learning, through the ways that you give and receive information, how you practice listening. A lot of us really need to work on our listening skills. We get so fucking triggered and riled up by people expressing opinions that are different than ours. And it's like, as soon as they start talking, we can't listen anymore because it just feels so activated. And a lot of the themes that are coming up right now hold so much charge. There is ancestral, intergenerational charge moving through so much of the content of the current moment. And so it's not surprising that, you know, our bodies go into fight, flight, and freeze mode when somebody opens their mouth to talk about whatever. But it is a problem if we are going to collectively co-create something else. And the nature of human existence, right, is that we're here together. And so, like it or not, we have to learn to live with difference. Sometimes gross differences, acute differences, differences that feel antithetical to the very fibers of our beings. And yet, here we are together. If we're constantly triggered and activated by each other, and if we're always at war in our individuated experiences, fighting each other over, you know, somebody's post on whatever social media platform where they used some kind of language that clearly exhibited how ignorant they are or whatever, you know, it's like, if that's the beginning place where we're just ready to rip each other to shreds for not being educated in the ways that we are, or not sharing our ideals and values, it's hopeless. The cause is lost. If we want to move into the future in ways that really provide sustenance for the diversity of human experience and life on Earth, we have to work inside of ourselves to address the friction of our differences. This place of friction holds so much potentiality, but if we can't work skillfully with it, it's going to explode all over us. And so again, we have circumstances emerging that are transformative in their substance. June, July, and August look pretty explosive to me. Mars will square Pluto, Mars will conjoin Uranus, and then August 14th, Mars and Jupiter form a conjunction in Gemini, and both of them square Saturn in Pisces. Okay, so now I'm going to say a little bit more about Saturn in Pisces. I'll also mention that right at the end of June, Saturn is stationing retrograde at 19 degrees of Pisces. A couple of days later, Neptune is stationing retrograde at the last degree of Pisces. And Saturn and Neptune are applying to a conjunction. So Saturn is applying in conjunction to Neptune. That conjunction won't perfect until 2026, but in 2025, it will be within 1 degree. It's so close. And where their conjunction does finally perfect in 26 is at the very first degree of Aries. And Aries is the first sign of the zodiac. Pisces is the last sign. In the symbolism of the zodiacal round, Pisces is the oceans of creation. It is the everythingness. It is where all life dissolves and becomes one. It is oneness. And we are here in oneness. We are all part of creation. Our bodies are borrowed. Our personalities and concepts of self are actually inherited and influenced from so many different directions. What is the self even? The self is empty. This is very Piscean, right? We are all here together, and we are living at a time when the conditions of the realm of our earthly experience are forcing us to be accountable to our interconnections. Neptune in Pisces is an influence that asks us to experience the permeability of our shared environment, whether that's through the environment or the ways that we get news or how we feel in our emotional bodies. We are affected by one another. Saturn in Pisces is asking for accountability to these interpermeations and interconnections. In 2026, Saturn and Neptune will come together, and we'll have a meeting of Neptune, a dissolving, dissipating, dreamy kind of influence. Neptune is the modern ruler of Pisces. Its themes are very similar. And Saturn, a forming, materializing, structuring influence as the ruler of Capricorn and Aquarius. Saturn requires us to labor and focus and concentrate and work through challenge in order to survive and manifest. Saturn and Neptune coming together is a unique opportunity to experience new dreams being formed. They are coming together. The first degree of Aries. Aries, again, is a symbol of the individual, the individuated experience. In 2026, we are going to realize a new dream of individuals here on Earth, maybe a new dream of what the kind of notions or concepts of masculinity might become, as a theme that is definitely connected with Aries. We might experience new ways of warriorship. After their transits in Pisces, maybe we will all become warriors of love. But for the time being, Saturn and Neptune are both stationing retrograde in Pisces, the end of June, beginning of July. And so we have, again, a period of integration and process, and need to reckon with confusion and overwhelm. And I will say that as we move towards this first square of Jupiter in Gemini, and Mars is also part of this, to Saturn in Pisces, distraction and confusion are really big themes. Mercury will also be retrograde during this time. I'll talk about that in a second. There's a full moon on July 21st at 29 degrees of Capricorn. Again, that anaretic degree of Capricorn. It feels like the forces that want to keep us in the past and devolve us are really on blast at this time. And I would say that distraction is a tool of dominant power. We see this over and over again, that in times of revolution and uprising, the movements that are being built often become undone because of distraction. And distraction can be a tool of the oppressor. Can we maintain our focus is a big question, I think, for Jupiter in Gemini from May of 2024 until June of 2025. Can we maintain our focus? In order to maintain our focus, in my opinion, we have to get below opinions. In order to maintain our focus, we need to move beyond identity politics and find the common denominator. The United States is heavily invested in war. The United States is invested in like something like 86 proxy wars throughout the world, funding various governments, militias, and terrorist groups. The United States has been deeply invested in destabilizing other governments for a long time. The United States is not alone in that investment. All of the imperial powers, all of the colonial powers, including Britain, including China, including Russia, including Israel, including North Korea, including Iran, there's more, right? There is such a deep investment in war that is bigger than any of the wars that are currently calling our attention. Some people are making a lot of money. If you follow the money of these wars, if you follow the lines of cash flow, you'll follow them back to weapons manufacturers. You'll follow them back to fossil fuel and mining operations. You will follow them back to legacy wealth families, looking at, again, kind of initial colonizing seeds and influences across the world. You will follow them towards the elite of the world, the very wealthy elite, who are not subject to borders or citizenship, who have enough money to bypass any kind of security checks, right? Who are building survival bunkers and who knows where and trying to colonize Mars. They are funding the wars to fight the wars, and they are fighting the wars to fund the wars because they're getting rich off of our destruction. My opinion, take it or leave it. They will continue to pit us against each other because it serves their profit bottom lines. You study the history of racism in the United States, you'll learn about how the wealthy elite constructed notions of whiteness in order to separate poor people, white people, Black people, who were working together in opposition to the wealthy landholders and slave owners. Whiteness was constructed to destroy the solidarity movement. They will continue to pit us against each other. Whatever the identity is, it could be nationality, it could be race, it could be language, citizenship, gender, whatever. They'll amplify these social issues. They will create conditions of violence to distract us from the greater violence, from the deeper violence. I might be getting into the realm of theories that you don't want to hear about, but a lot of news outlets talked about how Netanyahu knew that an attack was being planned on Israeli people months in advance of October 7th and did nothing about it. Israel's government is heavily invested in military. It is one of the most militarized governments in the world, including the United States. A huge amount of profit is the result of military technology and weapons manufacturing. The training of soldiers is an industry. That industry extends to the United States police force, police training grounds, cop cities popping up all over North America. Technologies of torture are being developed for control of incarcerated populations, as well as school children. Funding that goes into the school to prison pipeline is also funding that goes into military spending budgets. Can we hold our focus, and can we discern and decipher what the common threads are? So you don't need to agree with me. You can have your own opinion, but my question for you is, what's underneath what's happening? When we get caught up in the headlines of the current moment, we get caught up in the kind of like episodic fantasy of it. People get all up in a rile, all tizzied up. They focus on the one thing, but they don't see the larger picture. This is the water that we are swimming in, right? People get all riled up about, oh, there is police violence, you know, in this precinct, in this city. It must be a problem there. They don't see that this is the entire history of policing. Civil rights activists talk about how white supremacy is the water that we're swimming in. It's not the shark, it's the water. So Jupiter in Gemini, lots of stories, lots of thoughts, lots of ideas, lots of talking, lots of directions that concepts can go. Saturn in Pisces, the need to stabilize our sentiment and concentrate on the pervasive emotional realities. We are being manipulated to fight against each other because our violence against one another produces profits. When we're scared of each other, we don't share with each other. This is how capitalism works. It's like increased scarcity mindsets, so people will work harder to own their own shit. Increase people's sense of insecurity so that they will become consumers. Huge industries rely upon our insecurity. The entire beauty industry basically relies upon instilling insecurity in people, making them think that their bodies and their face and their skin and their hair like aren't good enough. So buy this product and then you'll be lovable, right? As if you weren't lovable already, implicitly, because you're a human being. So when I'm talking about what are our values really, what do we actually cherish? The thing I'm trying to say is, let's get to the bottom of all this. Let's really feel into the common threads in the story. Let's follow them back to their source. This requires us to do the work of moving into the past in order to move into the future. This requires us to hold the tension of the question, how did this come to be? And to do the work of self-examination, because on some level, we're all complicit in it and we all uphold it because it has shaped us. It's the water that we're drinking. And so my work as a white-bodied femme queer person who's an American citizen and primarily speaks English is going to be very different maybe than somebody else's work. But I need to turn towards that work. I need to do the work in myself of unpacking whiteness, of understanding how expansive my queerness can get. I need to look at my own economic situation and figure out how to adjust inside of it so that I can make choices that are more aligned with the equity that I want to see in the world. What do you need to do? How do you look inside of yourself to address these four eyes of oppression? The internal, the interpersonal, the institutional, and the ideological. You have that work to do too. August 5th, Mercury stations retrograde in Virgo, and it will retrograde back into Leo, stationing direct on August 28th at 22 degrees of Leo, 21 degrees, excuse me. This encompasses this period of time of Mars-Jupiter conjunction in Gemini, squaring Saturn in Pisces. And it moves very close to Mars square Neptune, which will happen on September 2nd. September 1st, Pluto will retrograde back into Capricorn. This retrograde to me feels like a big reworking from the earth back into the fire. from Virgo back into Leo, we are asking questions of usefulness. First of all, is what I'm doing necessary? Is it effective? What means is it serving? On a larger level, we are looking at resources, appropriation, misappropriation, use and distribution of resources. There's also, I think, a really big theme at this time around individuals, like particular personalities and what they are actually in service to. Right? Like I was reading an article the other day of a Black woman was talking about how she doesn't listen to Beyonce anymore, and was naming kind of complicitness with capitalist white supremacy that she sees Beyonce engaging with. And she's like, I know it's sacrosanct to say it, but I can't anymore because I continuously see this person not really like fighting for me, like for my worth. If she's there modeling the blood diamond, right, Tiffany's blood diamond, with zero mention of the brutal horrors of the African diamond mining, enslavement and trade, like what's going on there? There's some hypocrisy. Virgo back into Leo as a Mercury retrograde is an invitation for us to look at our leaders, to look at our charismatic leaders and celebrities, especially to look at our politicians, to look at the individuals who become leaders of movements and to ask, what are you in service to? Virgo is the sign of the servant, and Leo is the sign of royalty. And when we're working with this retrograde, I think we're also really needing to look inside, of course, and ask into our own existence and our own authenticity. My personal opinion and feeling is that when people are really witnessed and seen and encouraged to give their gifts and be their authentic and unique selves, that naturally produces relational accountability. And when more people are empowered to give their gifts and be their authentic selves, then we have generative, dynamic, and vital communities. And when people are really supported to love, right, and to express and to give their gifts, then they can be in service to what they are deeply devoted to. And again, I think most people really want to enjoy their lives. And the feeling of relational interdependence and harmony is such a basic human longing. This Mercury retrograde for me is asking for simplicity and honing in on core values. And because it's emerging at the same time as these Gemini Pisces aspects, I'm going to say that I also feel this Mercury retrograde as the time of deep confusion and a lot of information. And the need to simplify is to really tune in on an embodied layer and on a heart layer. Virgo as an earth sign rules the gut and processes of absorption and metabolism. Leo as a fire sign rules the heart and the spine. These are deep spaces of bodily intuition and knowing. And with Gemini, square Pisces, there's a lot of information flowing around. There's a lot of people who are going to be trying to influence us in every single direction. And I'm going to say we really need to develop and cultivate embodied intuition and discernment. And people know, they know in their bodies when something is wrong. Their ability to bypass that knowing is something that is cultivated culturally, right? Plenty of people knew, white people, plenty of white people knew that lynching is fucked up, right? Think about little kids being brought by their parents to lynch mobs. How did white supremacy get such a fucking stronghold? Because of terror inside of whiteness, because of this enforced complicitness right? Disregard what your body is telling you. Disregard the instinct to run, to shout, to cry, to try and help that person. Instead, children are, taught that, oh, if you speak up, if you speak out, you're going to be next, right? You won't get what you need. You won't get power. This is the way. And so it's like people are silenced. People are taught to disregard their bodily knowing. And in that, their intelligence becomes twisted and mutated. They cannot access their basic human decency, the wisdom of their heart. This is a time that requires courage, Leo, coraggio, the wisdom of the heart, to come into the heart's vibrancy, requires that we listen to our bodies. If we are going to discern and decipher in the midst of the mess of information that's out there, and all of the misinformation and all the fake news, and all the propaganda and everything that's coming your way, we need to be disciplined about checking our sources. This is also Virgo, Mercury retrograde, right? Double, triple check your sources. Ask deeper questions. Use your powers of critical analysis. Don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to learn. Don't be assholes to each other, right? If somebody doesn't know a thing that you think is just basic, like, don't yell at them about it. Invite them into a conversation. How do we focus and maintain our focus? How do we build momentum in this focus? If we want to create change, we cannot be wildly distracted and dispersed. The word distraction in anatomy means to pull bones apart from each other at the joint space. We need to be working to build coherence and bonds right now. And part of how we build coherence and bonds is by really tuning in, listening through our body minds, cultivating energetic sensitivity, capacity to be with the charge. People are going to piss you off this year. All the Mercury retrogrades enter into the fire signs. People are getting passionate. They are getting fired up. They are getting purposeful. People are opinionated. People are going to piss you off. Maybe I've already pissed you off in this reading. How do we build the agility to work through the charge without becoming part of the charge of the trauma? Resma Manicum does amazing work in this realm. If you've ever encountered his work of somatic abolitionism, he talks about a fortified mindset, a thick skin, and a soft and malleable heart. And that to me would be what we would want to center around this time of year. Fortified mindset, thick skin, and a soft and malleable heart. All right, I'm going to move on. Lots to say, but let's move on. Capricorn receives Pluto once again, September 1st. Pluto retrogresses back to the very last degree of Capricorn. It's going to hang out on that degree until mid-November. It'll station direct on October 11th. This is going to be a really heightened period of these last gasps of the Capricorn conservative, I would say, death grip on culture. I definitely imagine that the destructive powers of the age of industry are going to be, doing their thing around this time. This is a very powerful time for transformation of those elements as well. As Pluto moves back into Capricorn, you want to be really focusing on learning the lessons and integrating the curriculum of Pluto and Capricorn where it's been transiting in your chart. Check out your 2024 year ahead reading for more on that. Then we get into more eclipses. So our second set of eclipses, the first one is on September 17th at 25 degrees of Pisces. This is an eclipse that is conjunct with Neptune. It's sextiling Uranus and squaring Jupiter. This is a powerful eclipse. It's the first eclipse in the series of eclipses that will now take place over the next year and a half in the signs Pisces and Virgo. The North Node is in Pisces, bringing an evolutionary momentum into this sign and this space. Pisces, again, is the space of oneness. We're all in this together. As different as we are, as much as we don't even want to be around each other, we're all in it together. We are all drinking water, we're breathing air, we are living here on planet Earth. And the changes that Earth is going through will impact everybody to varying or lesser degrees, but everybody will be impacted. This is an eclipse that is really, I think, a huge pronouncement of collective sentiment. Pisces is certainly a sign of loss. There has been so much that has already been lost that has never been given time and space to grieve. This is a very powerful time for collective grieving. The more that we can give space for grieving what needs to be grieved, I think the less reason for grief we're going to have in the future. Part of the toxins and dis-ease of the current moment is that so many harms have not been addressed. There actually has never been any kind of reparation for the genocide of indigenous people all over the world because of European colonial powers. There has never been any kind of significant reparation for enslavement of millions of people on the African continent who are brought against their will to the Northern Hemisphere, right? Like, because of these harms that happened and were ongoing and still ongoing, we're stuck somewhere, right? History continues to repeat itself. When we collectively come together to honor, to acknowledge, to grieve, and to feel, transformation can happen, healing can happen. As a person who's worked in the realms of trauma and trauma therapy and healing for a long time now, I've continuously been impressed at how adaptable human beings are and how quickly actually people can heal when there is accountability, when there's space to pause and to be with and to mourn. That allows for integration. Life is traumatic. Life is going to go on being traumatic. When we get caught in the freeze state, or when we get caught in the cycles of fight and flight, pleasing and appeasing or whatever, we're not dealing with the source of the dis-ease. September 17th eclipse is a wonderful time to plan a collective grieving ceremony. For those of you who are out there doing community organizing, grief spaces are such an important thing right now, and something that a lot of people are offering for one another. This is an amazing time to do it. My hope is that that's what's happening in collective consciousness, so it doesn't need to happen through some kind of happening that we don't want. And we're living at the time of the Anthropocene. The scholar artist Jill Cassad calls this the Necrocene, the age of death, where death forces really have become the determining, governing principle of development on Earth. Bayo Kamalafe, the fugitive scholar, describes this as the Afrocene, a period of time that the transatlantic slave trade and its ongoing repercussions and kind of cultural currents that is what has created this current era and moment of extreme suffering and real misuse of human creativity. So this is the time that we're in. Pisces is also the place of dreams and imagination, and everything that breaks down then becomes substance for creation and recreation. On October 2nd, we have a solar eclipse in Libra at 10 degrees of Libra. This is an eclipse that really asks us to feel into the Libran lessons of balance and remind ourselves that this too shall pass. Nothing lasts forever. When we can do the work of finding the middle path in our own beings, right? Not highly reactive states, but regulating and co-regulating with one another, then we can do the work of change. That solar eclipse is conjunct with the black moon Lilith and with Mercury. It will be squaring Mars in Cancer at that point. It's a very powerful eclipse for coming together and for doing the work of possibility modeling and role modeling, solidarity building, and forming new alliances. This is a major theme in 2024, strategic alliance. Then as we get into November, okay, November 3rd, Venus in Sagittarius opposes Jupiter in Gemini. And on the same day, Mars in Cancer opposes Pluto in Capricorn, both of them at the very last degree. I think that this is right around the general election in the United States. Literally nobody needs astrology to look ahead at the 2024 election and predict it's going to be a shit show. Literally nobody needs an astrologer to say that, but astrologers will tell you that because all of the symbols are here, these aspects being two of them. And also, guess what? Mercury is already in its shadow as of November 7th and moving towards a retrograde beginning on November 25th in the sign of Sagittarius. The United States has a Sagittarius rising in the Sibley chart. Sagittarius is the sign of judges and courts. It's definitely related with philosophies and worldviews. Pluto re-enters Aquarius for the last time for good on November 19th. It's going to stay there until 2042. There's a wild feeling eclipse on November 15th. That eclipse is 24 degrees of Taurus. It is, I think, exactly conjunct with Uranus. It's trine Pluto. It's sextile with Neptune. Saturn is stationing direct November 15th. This is a wacky time. This is a wacky time. Mars will station retrograde on December 6th. I'm just going to say that my prediction is the end of 2024 and all of 2025 and into 2026 is a major shit show. I think chaos is the mother of invention. Chaos is creative, fertile ground. There is a lot of potential at this time, and it's a fucking shit show. My prediction, nobody's asking for it. Maybe you are. I'm just giving it. Some people are listening. I think that 2024 will bring a huge progressive wave. Definitely into the United States where I am. This is the political landscape that I have the most awareness of. I think that the US is going to experience an enormous progressive wave. I also think that that wave will destabilize the Democratic Party. Personal opinion is that a two-party system is inadequate. And personal opinion, the parties aren't that different from one another. A lot of the politicians are all in corporate pockets, personal opinion. I think it is likely that there will be a major fracturing of governance, and that this will produce some kind of civil war. Uranus will be moving into Gemini in 2025. In 2025, we have an incredible alignment of Uranus and Gemini, Pluto and Aquarius, both of them trying to one another, and both of them sextiling Saturn and Neptune in the very first degree of Aries. Lots of air and fire. In many ways, I would say that the US is already in a civil war. And so I use that term, and I know a lot of people are going to be like, oh my God, and have all kinds of images come up in their head. I don't know if I have a sense of like, what does this look like? It could be a war of information. It could be a war of resources. It could be, for sure, extremist factions in the United States, most of which are white supremacist factions against the people, the other people, I don't know, the majority, the global majority, the progressives, the libs, I don't know. The powers of the state do not want to let go of their force. We have increasing military budgets, right, consistently in the United States. Artificial intelligence and the surveillance state, weaponized technologies. Maybe it's not even going to be a group of people fighting another group of people. Maybe it will be people against other people who have robots and weaponized technology on their side. There are so many dystopian threads that I could pull at. But I don't actually feel that way. Like I feel like those are potentials. They're already potentials. They're already happening. We already live in a militarized surveillance state. It could get worse. It's possible, if not probable, that it will. But how I truly feel is that there are more people who want harmony, balance, opportunity to live the dang lives and experience simple pleasures, feeling that they have a meaningful existence, that they get to give their gifts and hone their skills, and they can experience love and connection and family. I think that there are more people who want that than people who want to fight to the point of global destruction, which is really the precipice that we're on. Through 2024, I think that it's very likely that we may experience some really close calls to total global annihilation. I would say that as of December 19th, when I'm recording this, we're already on the close call. Like, it's already here. We are on the tipping point. Nuclear power, climate chaos, weaponized technology. I don't know where you want to go. My feeling, my hope for sure, my offering to this moment is that there is so much creative potential right now. There's so much creative potential. And the potential is inside the stories that we tell. And so I don't want to tell more stories of global dominance and destruction. That is happening, and there's a lot of other things that are happening too. People are building incredible solidarity movements. People are and have always been working brilliantly with one another and with the land and with other life forms on Earth. People know how to heal. People are cultivating capacity for working with immense intergenerational and intercultural charge. People have a lot of skills, and people have a lot of love, and people have a lot of desire to experience the benefits that life on Earth can offer. And I think that that is where we are headed. And it is going to be, and it is already, a distressing transition and transformation. But I think we're on our way. And the more that we can connect with one another across the lines of difference and distance, the more resourced we will be. If we can build movements of solidarity that move against militarized borders, that increase ethics of inclusion, we will experience our communities growing in abundance. People are innately creative and have a lot of intelligence and capacity. And when that is what we support in one another, that is what will come through. I've experienced this so much with astrology. It's why I love it so much. It gives me an access to really deeply appreciating gifts and skills and perspectives that are vastly different than my own. Without astrology, I might get there at some point, and the powers of curiosity are great. But astrology is amazing because it gives us a map and it shows us how what is totally outside of our own familiarity is also full of wonder and value. I work a lot with couples and relationships and groups of people with astrology. And there's so much space and levity and humor and love that becomes available when we recognize that, oh, that person isn't like against me. They're not inherently flawed. We just have different Mercury situations. You know, we communicate totally differently. Our moon Venus placements are kind of antithetical to one another. Our love languages are wildly different. It doesn't mean they don't care about me or want to harm me. It's just that they don't see the same things that I do. When we can develop languages that help us appreciate one another in our differences, then we have a lot of creative potential. Then we can move outside the realms of our own fear and mistrust and closed-mindedness and expand our consciousness. 2024 for me is a year of intentionally expanding consciousness. We can do this by cultivating the art of conversation and curiosity and doing the work of somatic enlivenment that allows us to attune in the present moment to what is happening in the here and the now. If we are in the past or in the future, we're attached to something. In the here and the now, this is where change is happening. In the present moment, so much is possible. And when we can regulate and co-regulate in presence, so much is possible. So I'm going to leave it there. And I certainly hope that any or all of that is interesting and helpful for you. I've been talking at you for like 3.5 hours. I imagine that you'll be listening or watching this in chunks. Maybe you're going to get through it. Maybe you've gotten to this point. If you have, I thank you. Thanks for your attention. Thanks for your participation with me. If you appreciate this work, check it out at embodiedastrology.com. Join me in the somatic space every week. We're going to work to cultivate presence and embodied curiosity and build our skills of attunement and work with the astral influences week to week as they bring opportunities to encounter challenge and growth in our lives. Over the course of 2025, we have amazing offerings being planned right now. We're in an emergent space because we're working with astrology, not the Gregorian calendar. But as of Aries season, our new programs will all be commencing. And we have opportunities for you to work with astrology and grief tending and community building and community preparedness and conflict mapping and mediation and communication. We have opportunities for you to let astrology provide a container for your art and activism, to assist you in your relationships, and so much more. So check us out. And if you want more astrology for you, for your personal life, check out your year ahead readings. I'm working on those now. I've got about half of them done, and I'll be finishing them up in the first week of the new year. Those readings are always so fun for me to do. There is so much that's happening this year, and how it works through your personal life, you'll find out in the year ahead readings. So those are for your sun, rising, and your moon signs. And I'm going to leave it there. Thank you for your attention. I'm wishing you all the best in 2024 and beyond. Bye for now.